Yeah.
It goes. Communism.
No one on the stream could see this, but Tim was losing his shit.
Yeah, I was. Oh, are we not up yet? I thought we
Love
were
that,
up.
didn't you?
No, we're up. We're just
I do think we should do a whole episode that's just death grips.
We should get MC Ride on as a guest. I'm sure
Yeah.
that would be interesting.
I do fucking love death grips, actually.
I bet wherever he is, he doesn't have the internet though.
We become the 4 pharaohs of the single sound. Let's fucking go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Red Planet. This is a show where we chat about things that are beast and how we make a better world. We usually have a guest on. This week we won't. For Red Planet heads. Need a better name for that. Fans of the show who regularly tune in. You'll be not shocked to hear that because the reason we don't have a guest is that we are doing a bit of a theoretical discussion this week. It's not like big book time. We're not busting out Das Kapital, but we're just talking about some shit that's going on in the real world that like is a bit more abstract and needs a bit more of a chat.
Mm-hmm.
We are the book this week.
Yeah.
We are actually the book.
Our minds are an open book.
And we know how many of you sweet little teeny tiny chatters don't like opening books. I understand this. So, like Mule said, we are the book. This will be a nice, friendly, chatter-friendly way of getting that information. How's that sound, chat?
Good.
They love it.
Books
I can
are
already
hard.
tell.
They are
They
into
are
it.
hard. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Getting a bunch of trans rights in the chat. Is it today?
I think today's
is it
Trans
Day of
Remembrance Day.
Remembrance?
Yeah, I think today.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Yeah. Did you fail to remember that?
No, I remembered. I remember about trans people.
What does that mean if you're trans and you forget?
Their rights matter to me. I have some of my best friends are transgenders.
Transgenders.
I'm gonna go see some transgenders tomorrow in a warehouse.
Oh shit.
And also, by the way, chat, we are doing a new setup. So like last time, because we have Mule and Tim with us today, if you see any obvious glaring errors, like the audio levels are weird or the video gets weird or whatever, please let us know. I won't yell at you today about it. Probably. As long as you go about it nicely. Not like last time, which is very vague comments that got me upset.
Am I quiet?
Sound good to me, babe.
Quiet.
You
Hey,
sound
did
fine.
everyone hear me all right? Is that going
quiet,
okay
mule.
for everybody?
Oh my god, they
Small.
text
Tiny little mule.
so
I'm
tiny.
just a scrunkly peanut. Right.
Hey,
know they're going in
Scrunkly
the chat.
Peanut.
Okay, yeah, everyone's saying that
Hey.
that's okay.
Hey, my scrunkly little peanut.
Yeah.
What was the most beast thing you did this week?
I spoke to a house of students who are having extremely horrible living conditions. Basically, they got a rodent infestation, they got a silverfish infestation, and they got it's gross. It is gross. Like, you know, obviously it's not the animal's fault. They're just looking for somewhere nice and damp and slimy to hang out.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
Same, honestly.
Aren't we all?
that damp and slimy place is a flat that should not be damp and slimy because the letting agent should be making sure that the property is habitable. Category 1, 2, 3 hazards,
Absolutely.
which is something that is represented in the safe housing guidelines that I know now because I know stuff like this because I am in the tenants union. So what we did is I spoke to them and got them a little bit radicalized against letting agents and landlords. We found out that this letting agent is a huge international letting agent that specializes in students and of course exploits the fact that they need somewhere to stay when they go to study at a university / college, and so they're like, hey, why don't you stay in this house? It's gross, but you know what else are you gonna do?
Yeah, you're a student.
Be homeless? Right, exactly.
I have a news article this week that's gonna make you like turn red and steam's gonna come out your ears.
Great.
Like it's a lettings thing and it's gonna piss you off so
Love
bad.
that. Love that. Yeah, it's definitely going to upset me. So what we did was, so sort of like, explain to them why this was happening, why they know people that this is happening to as well, because this is just not like a one-time thing that, just these students at just this one university are experiencing. And they were all kind of like, oh, right, cool. Well, we were going to strike on the student union strike anyway next Friday. So let's all meet up there and then we'll discuss the next line of direct action. And to be honest, if I can get them all to join the union, I think that probably the biggest thing we could do is make them do a rent strike. Just sort of like an unofficial rent strike, because it's like a house of 5 people, right? Do the maths, folks. Do the maths. Times the maths. I can't do maths, so you've got to do research. Every single one of these students, there's 5 of them, right? 5 of them, and they're paying £500 a month, right? In this horrible, shitty squat, right? Well, I say squat because I know people who squatted in places that are more habitable than this, right? So Sophie's doing a bit of maths. I can see that Sophie's got her maths face on, probably. I don't know.
Calculating.
Yeah, that's Sophie's calculator face. So it's about, the numbers are about 30 grand a year or something that this landlord or letting agent is making on this flat, where they're just refusing to do anything about this, by the way. That's the whole issue. They're refusing to do anything about this. But yeah, I'm radicalizing them. They're going to do a rent strike, hopefully. Probably, I don't know. They might not do a rent strike. Tune in next week to find out.
Hell yeah.
But Tim, what is the most base thing that you did this week?
Can't really talk about it. So I'm gonna pass the ball back to Soph and
sure.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very exciting. I was just saying before the show that the Dark Red Planet episode is where we're just all of us are like, we can't talk about it. And did we all do something based together? Did we all do separate base things?
Sure, yeah.
Can't talk about it. Don't know.
Didn't mean to put you on the spot there, Tim. I literally forgot what we spoke about 5 minutes ago.
It's not as dark as you might imagine, but
okay.
Yeah.
The most beast thing I did this week. Actually, I was so ready when I woke up this yesterday for it to be a stickering thing, putting up stickers for fighting the sticker war against this turf in my neighborhood. Then yesterday, Nat and I started making plans to go meet all our neighbors and get them tenants union pilled, and that was going to be the thing. And then today, someone came off their bike right outside our house. And so we did first aid and helped them get in an ambulance, and Nat usually watches the show live, but she's just at the hospital right now with this person. So shout out to Daphne. I hope you're okay. I know you're not watching the show. I hope your concussion isn't too bad.
Oh my god,
that was the most base thing we did this week.
Yo,
it was bad. It was bad. Yeah. So yeah, helping that person out was the base thing. And you know what? Here's why I want to talk about it on the show. We had a first aid kit, which if planetoids remember, was a homework on a globe. If the redheads in the audience remember, it was an earlier homework to get a first aid kit, and we did it that week for the homework, and we used it today.
That's so cool.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It is cool, Kira. And now it's time for me to ask you.
God damn it.
Beast?
No, I'm the least base of everyone here. Okay, so what base things I did this week? Being mentally ill and trying to take care of that. So that was pretty base to try to manage that shit, I guess. My own direct action to myself. Was a slut. Check out my socials if you're interested.
Based.
But basically that. I think I've been so invested in trying to pursue that, and that's been really fun and very empowering, especially as a feminist personally. But I want to get back into what y'all are talking about. I think it's about time that I start branching out a little bit more and touching grass and et cetera, et cetera. So I'm excited.
You can do it.
Thank you. I believe in myself.
I believe in you.
Thank
we all
you.
believe
I
in
believe
you.
in you too.
I believe that we will win.
Tim
I believe that Kara will win.
Tim it's fine.
Tim's chilling.
I don't care. Anyways, it doesn't matter to me.
Well,
it's morning for him.
That's sad.
It is. It's like, well, it's
I
a
don't
little bit
really
later
live in
now with
time
daylight
zones,
savings.
so I don't really.
I found out about the origin of daylight savings recently, and it was like literally a New Zealander guy who he was like some kind of bug catcher, and he just wanted like an extra hour to catch bugs.
What?
Yeah. It's
I
like,
hate that. I hate everything about that.
yeah, what is it? George Vernon Hudson.
What was he catching bugs for anyway? The fucking.
He's an entomologist. Yeah.
Why do we even need that? What is that? What's an entomologist? That sounds like bollocks to me. It's a made-up job for a made-up person.
Apparently, like a bunch of industries and stuff pushed it after that, but it was like the first thing. He just wanted that extra hour of good bug catching.
Okay, that's a fake job. But what's a paranormal investigator?
That's a real job for real ghosts because they're real. Ghosts are real. They're not dead people. They're just an energy that we don't understand. Quite possibly an interdimensional alien of some kind that we just don't understand.
I'm gonna do a monster man on ghosts, and I actually need to talk to you next week when I see you about a ghost thing. I've actually concocted a ghost story, right? Yeah. That like going in, you know that I'm just telling you a story, and I've come up with it, but I want to test the criteria to see if you would find it believable.
Okay, yeah.
Like, right, yeah. Cool. All right. I'm excited to try that. I'll report back next week, everyone, to see if I convinced Mule that there was a real ghost.
I was trying to do, and I got distracted. I want to tweet that we're live.
Oh, shit.
Yes. That's a great idea.
Is it time for us all to look cute?
I already took a screenshot. Oh, I posted in there. I mean, let's look cute right now. Let's do it on purpose. Let's do it right now. Okay, here we go. Chat, look cute. Let's get chat.
I never look cute on purpose. I just do it effortlessly.
To post on our Twitter, twitter.com/red_planet_TV. While it lasts, who knows what's going to happen with Twitter, but as it stands, you should follow us there. Oh, look how sweet. Look at the sweet little chatters. Look how sweet they are. And all of you here are here without those. You're probably like a notification gang or something. So I really appreciate you being here.
Notification gang.
All right, let's do it. 3, 2, 1. Okay, we're good.
all right, we're good.
Tim, you are an absolute
smiles
model.
after the picture's over. He's like,
when the photographer's like, say cheese, everyone goes cheese, and then you just hit cheese.
Hell yeah.
How about some news though, Kira? Yeah. How about that? What if you told me about some news?
How about this? I'll post it because I want to read the first news story. But how about I post these in the Discord and then y'all.
That works for me. I'll do a tweet.
Perfect. Okay, so let me do that real fast.
Okay, let me bring that.
Boop boop boop. Okay, there's some two from before, but these are the new ones. Okay, so Starbucks chat, Starbucks, or as we say in Greece, Starbucks. When I went to Greece, because I'm Greek. When you want to ask where the Starbucks is, he goes, Pune to Starbucks. Pune to Starbucks.
Oh,
very cute. Anyways, yeah. So, Starbucks. Unionizing everywhere, as you all know. Starbucks is being extremely a big glob of shit about it. They are doing everything in their power and doing illegal things. Like, it's already pretty, American labor laws are pretty shit, but they exist, even though they're shit, they do exist, and Starbucks is still violating those.
Yeah.
So let me pull up. Hold on, let me do this. All right. Sorry, we got new. Oh wait, no, wait. I can't do that. But yes, I can. Sorry.
I believe in you. You can do anything you set your mind to.
Thank you, Sophie. Okay, that didn't work. Give me a second. I got this. Point it toward window. There it is. Okay, so Starbucks. So over 100 unionized Starbucks locations engaged in a strike action last Thursday for Red Cup Day. Red Cup Day. And it's historically one of the company's most busiest days. So let's see if I can play this without it being any volume. Yeah, perfect. So this is organized by Starbucks Workers United, and the strike is over refusal of the company to bargain for equitable contract with store workers who seek higher pay guaranteed hours, safety improvements, and healthcare equivalent to that of corporate employees. And as a former Starbucks employee myself, because I worked at Starbucks in Seattle and Chicago, like multiple times, like multiple stores. I worked at Starbucks for a really long time, and I mean, none of us are surprised at these workers like requesting these things. If you ever worked in like service industry or the food industry specifically, or even specifically at Starbucks, because many of you have, you are aware of this bullshit. Like, for instance, if you're a wage slave, never having guaranteed hours, having to fight tooth and nail to get hours, and also like the store making sure that you never have enough hours so you can qualify for benefits and things like that. Like Starbucks engages in all these things. Or getting scalding burns, and the company tries everything in its power to prevent you from getting compensated for it, as was my personal experience. Like, I got burned there, and I told the manager, and she just made it impossible for me to do anything about it. She's like, well, and I didn't know anything about anything at that point. So I was just like, okay, I don't want to be a problem, you know, because I could have easily probably gotten fired for you know, making a problem. They're firing people right now for trying to organize. So, Starbucks Workers United gave union branded red cups to customers waiting in line at the striking locations, which is pretty cool. Let me show you that. Red Solo cup.
Oh, cool. I want one. Oh, it looks so good.
Oh, yeah.
And it supports unionized workforces.
You can't hear the audio because I don't know how to do that yet, but basically they're handing these union cups to customers, which I think is so fucking cool. I think it's so fucking cool to have something tangible also. And plus,
well, I think that goes like hand in hand with something we heard from the unionizer we interviewed on the show, right? Which was like, one of the ways you can support them is go in and tell them that your name for the cup is like join a union, or like union rise up, or whatever. Like, they've kind of taken that idea and run with it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I was thinking that exact thing. And also, Starbucks, people that stop at or go to Starbucks oftentimes really like merch, like Starbucks merch. This is a pretty common thing. Starbucks capitalizes on this pretty heavily. So to have like merch for your like unionization efforts, I think is a really clever idea.
I mean, I would not buy Starbucks merch, but I would buy Starbucks union merch.
Right. Exactly.
So another really cool thing about this is that 2 days prior to the strike, the U.S. National Labor Relations Board, or the NLRB, filed in Michigan for a court to bar Starbucks from firing employees for union activity nationwide. So the NLRB has been on Starbucks' ass about its anti-union shits for some time now, ever since, like, you know, the big wave of unionization started. And I personally don't know what kind of teeth they have, because I think a lot of what we're seeing is pretty unprecedented in America right now. But, or at least for modern America, right? The labor movement now is unrecognizable in many ways from the labor movement of yesteryear. But it does seem like they are on Starbucks' ass right now. So I'm personally very interested to see how this plays out. I don't know if any of the hosts have any idea of how this will play out, but
I mean, pushing back against that union busting is just good news for the union. I think that it will file into like too, American.
It's really bad.
Oh, totally, yeah.
Starbucks loves to pride itself as some, like, you know, your buddy, your friend, like pro worker, blah blah blah. They're obviously
absolutely.
Not.
I mean, America has class action lawsuits as a legal thing. So, I mean, like, the people who have been fired by Starbucks for trying to organize a union, getting recognized by the NLRB that they are being fucked over, like, that could be a big deal and could probably result in, like, the union getting some serious damages won against Starbucks.
Yeah, for sure. Right. And that's pretty much all I have on that. It's a very exciting. And,
I just wanted to say about it, like, we've been covering this for a little while, and like to see within 1 year that they went from not having any unions to doing a national strike is really inspiring. Like, there must be other workers at other big companies thinking like, shit, we could get going with this.
Just to reiterate, for the when Sophie's saying national strike, we're talking about not only organized Starbucks individually, but multiple Starbucks, like over 100 of them unionized, which is already incredible, seeing how there was like I think none before, right? I'm still like reading
literally
how much, like literally
absolutely.
None. Going from none to now over 100 are now unionized and working in tandem together to do a day of striking during an extremely busy day and have merch, which is incredible. Merch, you know what I mean? I think it's so fucking cool. It's extremely based, hyper based, if you will. Yes.
Okay, let me tell you about something that's going to make Mule start whistling like a tea kettle and turn red in the face. Steam pour out of his ears. He's going to be so mad.
I've already read it. I hate it.
He's already reading. Okay, so DDD, or ... is the name of the organization. Is fucking hell. Is a property guardianship social enterprise founded by Catherine, I think it's Catherine Hibbert, and she used to be a squatter. So whenever this shit happens, right, where someone used to be a squatter and then they are like being a landlord, that's just we're already in just like the cursed dimension. We're already visiting Mr. Mixelplux right at his house. So, for those who don't know, property guardianship is a scam in which landlords supposedly offer lower rents, but, in practice often not really lower. The idea originally is more like they're paying you and like the payment comes out of your rent, so like you pay less rent, or you don't pay rent and you're looking after the property. But what this has quickly evolved into in the capitalist nightmare world we live in is people paying the full amount of rent to live in a shitty property that needs upkeep, and the landlord won't fix because the whole point is that the property guardian is supposed to be taking care of it. And why DDD was considered like like a social enterprise. It's literally had coverage in The Guardian, in the Daily Mail, Open Democracy. Like, the Evening Standard gave Catherine Hibbert an award for being a socially conscious entrepreneur. And the reason is that the property guardians, to explain this relationship again, it's just like a tenant, only you don't have any tenants' rights because you're technically a licensee. You have to do some work that the landlord is telling you to do. There are other stipulations frequently, like you can't have guests without the landlord's permission, or you can't have pets, or there's a curfew and shit like this, right? It's just garbage. It's just a scam. It just sucks. Sorry, I'm just reeling at how bad it is. So DDD was thought of as this amazing social enterprise because they got their property guardians to do volunteer work, like a certain number of hours of volunteer work every month as part of their like contract for like lower rent, which sounds just great, doesn't it? Rather than having to upkeep the property, you're going to do volunteer work and make the community better, and then you get lower rent in response, in theory. So Catherine Hibbert is now she has thousands of tenants. Sorry, licensees. That was a slip of the tongue. She has thousands of tenants, I mean licensees, and she is boosting the rent for like hundreds of her tenants, I mean licensees, by between 10 and 113%. Claiming that they also need to like top up their deposit that they already paid when the rent goes up, and also trying to get them to pay like administrative fees. So this is deeply fucked. There is an article in Novara Media that you can read if you want to know more about the whole situation. I will drop it in chat just now. The particular thing I'd really, really like everyone to do, like open this link. You don't have to deal with it right now, but like, if you want to stay watching the stream, but just open this in another tab. The property guardians are putting together a legal fund because as they aren't tenants, they don't have the legal rights of tenants, so they can't sue the landlord, who is just a fucking landlord, in the same way. So they need a legal fund to get a legal representation that they would otherwise be entitled to.
So on that, it's interesting, again, the sort of like change in relationship between these people who are definitely tenants of a landlord, but like, oh, I'm just going to call it something different. Are you going to be a licensee? Like, this is what happens with websites like spare room as well, and that also means that the lodgers have no fucking rights in
or
that shit as
contractors
well.
like Uber drivers. You can see this.
Yes, I was gonna say that it's just like Uber. It's just
Exactly
like
the same.
Uber, but for
or Twitch
living
streamers.
somewhere.
And this is why collective dispute action is the way to go for it. Because I don't know what lawyers are like if is this in the UK? Is this in the
this is in the UK.
Oh, it's in the UK. So you know, housing lawyers in the UK are few and far between. We work very closely with a law firm called Greater Manchester Law Centre at the Tenants Union, and there are literally 3 lawyers there who could do housing stuff. Do you know what I mean? And lawyers normally pick up about 3 cases a year, because setting up a legal case is a lot of work. There's a lot of stuff that goes on, not just, you know, with the sort of setting up of the case, but also, you know, you have to send people to psychiatry appointments. You have to send people to all this kind of stuff. So they don't pick up a lot of cases in a year. And in this year alone, in Greater Manchester, there are 5,000 people at direct risk of a Section 21 eviction, which is a no-fault eviction.
Jesus Christ.
So if we think these 3 lawyers are going to pick up 3 cases a year, that's 9 cases a year, right, this year. And what are the other 991 tenants going to do? So that's why we have to do collective dispute action. That's why absolutely everybody has to join a union. Absolutely everybody should support unions if they can.
Absolutely.
That's what I want to say.
Tim's just dropped out of the call, and the entire stream has been destroyed by Tim's absence. I don't know what happened there.
It's okay.
Maybe,
this is fine. Like,
maybe
look,
Conrad can chuck a dummy in to fix it. Do you think this is better? Okay, you know what? There's one screen for my face and one screen for my tits, so it's working great.
I only want to be.
I only want to see Emil's head.
Yeah, I only want to be perceived from the browser.
Just right at the top.
Me. Yeah, this is who I am, what I
and
represent.
Of course, I am perfect.
Yes. Unfortunately, Tim was going to read the next news.
Yeah, well, I still have a little bit more to say, and hopefully he'll jump back in before then, or we can have Conrad add a dummy that will fill in.
Yeah, go for it.
Something. Yeah. But I just wanted to say that a book that Catherine Hibbert may well have read, The Squatter's Handbook, right? Being a fucking squatter.
Yeah.
Dickhead.
Thank you, Conrad.
Actually has advice. Actually has an advice page about property guardians describing just like what a fucking scam it is. And I just wanted to say that in all caps and bold on this page, on page 13, they've just written right at the top, "We would not recommend becoming a property guardian." Because it's a scam. Anyway, Squatter's Handbook for anyone who is in the UK and considering squatting, as you should, because it's beast. Anyway, I could start telling you about Tim's thing. I know all about it. I put all the sources in. I know everything about this one. It's also one that we all know all about because we're all chronically online. So Twitter has continued to melt down. It's going so well. Sorry, this is a continued bit from last week.
There you go.
It's going so well. Should I? You got the sources, Skara?
Totally. Do I have the sources?
Tim's just restarting his router.
Okay, cool. I figured it was probably
the
internet. So Elon Musk has locked out all of the Twitter employees from the offices after last week saying that they all had to come in within the hour or else be fired. And then he was 15 minutes late to the meeting that he called.
It's called being a leader.
Now he's locked them all out and revoked their badge access.
To the simple mind, this would appear to be an extraordinarily contradictory series of actions, right?
But he has a very high IQ.
But yeah, he's a genius. He's in fact, what I've read on Twitter, literally the smartest man on earth.
And also,
he was on Rick and Morty, so you know.
And also, don't you understand? Twitter wasn't working before Elon got involved. It just simply didn't work. I was not allowed to go on racist tirades, so that doesn't work. That's Twitter.
It was
not
failing
working.
in its most fundamental duty, which is to let you go on racist tirades.
You may think that telling people to work from home and then closing the office and locking everyone out would be silly and ridiculous, but like I said, you're just a hater. So.
Yeah. You just don't
You don't
understand
understand
how
how
to be a
moves.
business.
Anyways,
Exactly.
So some people think that maybe he was locking the employees out because he's afraid that they're going to use their access to the building to steal everything and try to save
Sabotage,
Twitter
I think
from
he
him.
said.
No, it's like, I mean,
which shows
is it an
great
unreasonable
leadership. If you're
Like-
paranoid that everyone around you is trying to undermine,
It doesn't
you and
seem
sabotage
impossible
you.
to me. I'll just be real. Like, I don't think it's impossible that they would just be like, we need to just like get as much of the code, the resources, or fucking whatever as we can, and like take it somewhere and just like make Twitter, but not Twitter, but no Elon, the no Elons club,
Fair enough.
But then someone pointed out that he had also fired the guy who manages badge access. Like,
Oh yeah, that's right.
so it could be that he.
I thought that was a meme.
I don't think so.
Really?
A lot of the things
there's a lot of shit going around.
a lot of the things that sound like memes because they're so unreasonably out of this world are actually
The
turning out
bag
to be
access was a
completely
joke.
true.
I think this was a joke. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, the third thing I want to talk about was
It might be a joke, but let's pretend it's not a joke.
Yeah.
well, the third thing
It's
in that
totally
case.
reasonable. Like, here's the thing: if it's a joke, ha ha ha, it's funny. But like, I think what Sophie was just saying, like, this is a very plausible. Like, he's fired all of HR.
And
Yeah.
There's no one there to do payroll. No one's gonna
And
get
he-
payroll. Like,
he literally
why wouldn't you
fired
fire the bad guy?
he fired
Christ.
those two guys just because they were called Ligma and Johnson as well. Like that's an actual
Jesus
thing.
Christ.
He did that for a meme. And
All right,
like then he
so-
got them back and Ligma looked really sad. Like
Oh my
really
God.
sad.
Okay,
I
so
thought that oh my god.
So it probably is because of his fear of sabotage. And again, I don't think it's actually an unreasonable fear of sabotage that people would want to like just take it away from him,
Fascist
just stop him
leaders
ruining
have this,
Twitter.
By the way, this is a very common fascist leader of suspicion to think that everyone around you is like trying to get you. All of the people that you are supposedly like, all of your support is also like any second could turn on you and is like
Absolutely.
sneakily yeah.
And Tim's back.
But the last thing I wanted to say about this story was just that Musk sent out an absolutely unhinged email to employees ranting about Twitter 2.0, which is what he thinks they're making now, and just asking them to just like work around the clock all of a sudden, and that you have to like commit yourself to these like completely unlivable working conditions
At least 40
by a
hours
deadline,
you have to be-
or
You have
just
to go
get fired.
hardcore mode.
Yeah, exactly.
You just gotta go hardcore mode.
I think at this
Yeah,
point,
we will need to be extremely hardcore, says the email.
Yeah.
This will mean working long hours at high intensity. It's like, okay, Elon, so what are you doing?
He doesn't know
Yeah.
any of what that's like. It's so upsetting. Oh,
You're out
gosh.
saying you just have to have a passion for the job. It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
it
just
sounds
gotta be
like you don't
hardcore.
like putting in the hard work, elbow grease. It sounds like you're just one of those entitled hot chip eaters is what it sounds
Yeah.
like.
You
I
just
am.
chip
I only know how to
eaters.
eat hot chip and lie.
Same.
But what I really want more than anything right now is to hear from Mule about Bolivia.
That's right. Everyone's expecting me to flop and fail, but not this time because I've got a news story for you. Stop fucking laughing at me. What are you doing? Right? Okay.
No one's laughing at you. We think
I saw Sophie laugh. Shut up. Right. Anyway, here's what's happening.
I'm laughing with you.
She just thought of
Yeah,
something
all right.
funny at the same time you were talking. Is all.
Patronizing, whatever. Right. Okay. So census delay sparks. I'm just reading it like this now. No, there's been unfortunately, this is really bad news. Actually, it's really fucked. So there have been deadly strikes in Bolivia's Santa Cruz region, but I've actually learned a lot of stuff just in reading this and getting ready to read this news story. So I didn't know that this is how it worked, but in Bolivia, census data is used to allocate funds and services to areas based on the population and the demographics and stuff like that. And the last survey that happened was 10 years ago. And Santa Cruz, which is the region that these strikes have been going on in, has changed considerably in that time. General standard of living is very low. Many public services need funding after rapid population growth in these areas. The right-wing former government has been stoking civil unrest versus the current left-wing government with anti-communism core to their messaging. It's kind of like a similar deal as to how, I guess, demographics are voting in Brazil, because it says here that voters didn't favor the current left-wing government. They voted overwhelmingly for the Christian alternative. And that's kind of what we think.
I think it was like 45% for the Christian conservatives and only like 30-something% for the people that actually got in. So the movement towards socialism.
That's right. It's MAS, I think, the acronym. So really interesting that's kind of like a similar deal to Brazil, and like might be the reason why Lula kind of was, going very hard on the sort of like, I'm a Christian, etc., etc. But anyway, regardless, coming back to Santa Cruz, it seems that unions have been a target. Some union offices have been set on fire, particularly rural unions, which is extremely upsetting. Multiple deaths.
There's also a thing there with so the rural workers unions and stuff, like, because there's like all the agriculture and all that kind of stuff. A lot of those rural workers are indigenous. And that's like a huge part of what's happening as well, because a part of the delays was that they wanted to be able to translate everything into a bunch of indigenous languages so that indigenous people could be kind of considered in the census and actually take part in it. And then, like the assumption is that taking part in it, they will get more funds allocated to their stuff, which is like what the conservatives don't really like, because a lot of the indigenous people typically skew towards the left. So it's kind of like a culture war between the Christian conservatives and then like the poor and the indigenous and
literally,
good guys.
Literally, it's literally good versus evil, right?
I mean, but the Christian thing is a huge part of it as well. It's kind of like in a lot of the links that I found for this one, it isn't stated as much, but like some of the like a lot of the big protests have been centered around, that giant Jesus statue that they have, like the big Christ the Redeemer one and all this kind of stuff. And it's like very like, fashy Christian vibes. It's like, like what Carolina is saying in the chat right now, that Santa Cruz is a wealthy, white, pretty racist province, like compared to a lot of other areas, it definitely is. It's kind of like, it's like, even though I guess the general standard of living isn't comparable to like, like a wealthy white Christian American neighborhood or something like that, it's still like, like it's very much like that's where the white conservative kind of base is in Santa Cruz. So that's why where a lot of this friction is kind of coming from, and you look in these stories and you see like the people they're interviewing, the that are striking or protesting or whatever like that. It's like dudes in their like 40s and 50s, and like it's very much like a older kind of more conservative crowd that are running around the streets setting things on fire and
of course
and attacking people.
That giant Jesus is like, it's always just pointed to in like tourism reels and just like, hey, wow, look at the big Jesus. And I'm just like, having been to, we were discussing Armenia on the stream last week, and I was talking about like Mother Armenia, the like 200-foot giant woman with a sword who was like standing over Yerevan, like, and like, it's a nationalist symbol, and it literally, the statue used to be Joseph Stalin. Like, it is like it's actually just like a really bad vibe to just have a huge Jesus that can like see you at all times. Like, that's scary as fuck.
Awful vibe. Fucked vibe. So that's that, and solidarity with the people in Bolivia, the indigenous, the workers.
And it has been like super violent as well. It's like, like you see a lot of other strikes and protests and stuff, and look, this video that we got now, like this older woman and stuff.
She got like a what is that, like a fucking, I don't know, like it looked like a vicar's kind of shawl thing or something with a cross on it.
Extremely what the fuck vibes. As well as like a target on
what is that?
As well as aiming for like indigenous people and stuff, like anything that is considered like a symptom of like progressive politics has been a target. So this is including like there's like women's shelters, like women's refuge places and stuff that have been attacked pretty heavily, with the protesters actually targeting the woman staying in the shelters. after, and they're sheltering there because of like domestic violence and things like that.
Christ.
How
and
evil
there's like,
can you get? Like how
I know, right?
It's evil.
Speed running evil.
Like, ooh,
And,
let's go to where women are seeking shelter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
And-
apparently it's a left wing.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing.
thing.
It's like women's rights and stuff. It's like, and like the idea that like a woman should be subservient to her husband, and like it's his right to attack her or whatever like that. But yeah, and there's been a bunch of deaths and everything, and including like how like sometimes you get at protests you'll see deaths and it's like it'll be because of the kind of like all the people there, and there might be something that would happen, but it wouldn't be like a clear case of like murder or something like that. Or when there is, it's like a big thing about figuring out if it's murder or not. But there have been actual murders at these protests where they're like, no, this was just someone that was deliberately killed by protesters,
right?
Because they were the enemy or whatever. So it's pretty fucking wild. And there's like been a lot of counts of sexual assault and rape as well. So it's like very, very fucked vibes.
But that's definitely one to watch in the coming weeks, I imagine. How the left wing government responds to this.
It's interesting as well that there's a lot of newspapers like in America and stuff that are just referring to this as like a strike, and like it's like, well, technically it is a strike, but it's kind of being couched in progressive language because we're seeing a lot of other things around the world where it's like, oh, these people are striking to improve their quality of life or anything like that.
Yeah.
Whereas this is like a very reactionary kind
January
of thing 6th. That is like, exactly. It's like this is this isn't a strike in the way that most people would think like, oh, this is like this is like a labor movement thing. This is like people, trying to get better, like rights for the, like for an industry or something like that. Like this is legitimately like just right wing panicking. Like they're basically saying that because the population has ballooned in Santa Cruz, that they want more resources. But there's a budget, and they're kind of like, well, if we allocate more resources to Santa Cruz, they have to come from somewhere else. So it's going to take us time to figure that out. Plus, translating the documents, all that kind of stuff. And they're saying that is an attempt to basically disenfranchise their area, which is predominantly conservative. So they're saying like,
Jesus Christ,
it's like the lefties are in and now they're trying to take stuff from us or whatever. Like, never mind that it's like, it's like the population growth has nothing to do with the left or anything like that. It's just, whatever.
It's funny how language changes depending on what your perception of the matter is, because it's like I was reading the contents of that news and I was like, okay, so this is a fascist insurrection, right? And then I saw the word strike and my mind didn't go to strike. My mind went to like a firebomb or something. Do you know what I mean?
Right, like an attack,
An attack, like, like someone's got like a javelin and just gone boom or something.
Yeah.
So anyway, just an observation.
So I recently found out about this country. We're all familiar that Britain is pretty normal. And if there's a country more normal than Britain, but if there's a country more normal than Britain that's not an island, it's France. We can all agree, right?
Yes.
And like America,
surely no one more normal.
Yeah, I mean America, which is fake, it was made up by Britain. If there was a country that was like one part America, one part Britain, and one part France, right? Like how normal would that be? So I found out about this
like Voltron of normal.
Absolutely. So I found out recently about this country called Canada. And it's being really normal towards, I bet they have tropical climate. Anyway, so Canada is being exceptionally normal towards Haiti. We've been talking a little bit about Haiti in the last few weeks. To catch people up who weren't watching last week, we talked a little bit about the history of UN interventionism there, how the UN just gave Haiti cholera, just showed up and then there wasn't any cholera. UN showed up, there was cholera. Look at that. Then they said that they were going to like deal with helping cholera victims. They raised like 5% of the fund that they were going to. Just never helped Haiti. Last year, what's he called? Jovenel Moise. Yeah, I got it right. Jovenel Moise, the Haitian president, was assassinated in July last year, and so things have been pretty wacky since then. The current leader of Haiti wasn't elected in any form. He's just like the acting leader since then. So there are massive protests. There have been, this is what we were talking about last week, was that there are these protests because the current acting leader was like calling for more UN interventionism, and like the people don't want that. They don't want that at all. But all of the Western media sources reporting on this are like massive protests in Haiti as the government, like as there are calls for UN intervention, and it's like that's not what's that's massive protests against that, my guy.
Yeah.
And we also talked about how like whenever the Western media or governments talk about Haiti, they always talk about gangs and how scary these gangs are. And there is for sure some violent crime in Haiti. It shouldn't be written off. But the gangs that they're talking about in many cases are just people organizing together. And like, yes, they might have guns because they're resisting like the state, like the armed state. But they are like trying to represent the will of the people in many instances. So
gang is always derogatory, right? There's no such
thing
as, like,
absolutely, right? Like
when especially with news coverage.
I mean, wait until we start the Red Planet gang. But
talk about that, Sophie.
The secret Patreon tier. Get ready for gang mode. So something that happened a little while ago in September was I think it's 9 gangs got together and formed a coalition that called themselves the G9, which I think is a pretty funny, like, satirical name. They're led by a guy called Jimmy Barbecue Chezier. So just based. They actually blockaded a fuel port in Haiti. Now, this has had some like negative ramifications. It should be acknowledged, right? Like they're talking about like hospitals that can't get power and like the delivery of like food and like clean water and stuff like this. But they didn't do this for no reason. It's not like the gangs trying to seize power. They were doing this because the president was trying to basically raise the price of fuel, and that like all Haitians would be hit really, really hard by fuel, like the fuel price being raised. And so they were doing this as a form of protest, and they were very explicit about that being
there's always going to be those issues with any sort of protest. Like a Black Lives Matter protest blocks a street, and I was trying to go from point A to point B, and now it's disrupted that, like, or some sort of, or you know anything, like we're talking
like
about
I tried
like,
to go to Starbucks and they were picketing and
or we're talking about
exactly.
like climate change, like direct action, like, oh, you've made it difficult for me to now acquire fossil fuels to run to run this machine or whatever in order to achieve certain ends. Like there's always going to be these types of things that occur, these disruptions. So don't let anyone ever try to like pull that guilt shit on you. That's what I'll say. People
well, I mean, you're not in like British social media, and you don't see like the British news, but like our media ecosystem is constantly pulling this exact thing. So anyone from Normal Island will be like intimately familiar, because like Just Stop Oil protesters, who even when you're discussing the news, you have to say their name is Just Stop Oil, right? It's very simple what they're like talking about, and we all understand the reason. And you know, they will do actions like, you know, just like blocking off a road by like putting their banners down and putting down weights and like locking themselves to it, or just like sitting with it or gluing themselves to stuff and all this kind of stuff. And like it's always reported as like this poor working class man couldn't get his Range Rover to work so that he could run the factory, you know, like this poor working class BAE systems engineer couldn't get to work in his Range Rover because they were blocking off the road. And shit like this, right? It's very, very common. So again, people from Normal Island will be familiar. But speaking of normal, I want to relate this Haiti stuff back to Canada. So Canada has sanctioned 3 Haitian politicians, and just like the idea of Canada being able to like sanction politicians in Haiti to begin with is just kind of like, why is that allowed? That's not normal. One former president and 2 former prime ministers, one of whom is currently a senator. And this is all accusing them of having ties to the gangs, right? Now, again, when the gangs are just representing what people want, right? It's they are punishing the politicians for having ties to the people of Haiti. So it's pretty incredible. Bodo, who's one of the or Bodo, who's one of the people sanctioned, called the sanctions a political move to assassinate his character and prevent him from participating in any future election. Right, that would be one of the consequences of this. And he said he was shocked, and he found this out like through a tweet. Like there wasn't even like an official process of like him he just saw a tweet by Canada's ambassador to Haiti, and he said, "All my life I've never participated in gang-related things, human rights violation or drug activities in my country or anywhere else. I have never participated in anything that can destabilize my country and the safety of my fellow Haitians." So that's one normal thing that's going on with Canada and Haiti, and I wanted to quickly touch on another very normal thing going on with Canada and Haiti right now, which is that Gerald Nicholas, 51, has been charged. He's a Quebecois man who's been charged by the Canadian government for terrorism. They are now. I don't know if this is true. I'm not saying that it's not, so I'm not reporting this as like, because his kind of defense so far has been like the RCMP are racist with badges, and whether or not he did the thing, that is true. But he is being charged with basically like traveling around to several different countries and trying to like raise funds and get people together and weapons to overthrow Jovenel Moise, who we will remember was assassinated in an unrelated separate plot. So again, everything is very normal. It's going so well. But yeah, basically Nicholas is insisting that this is all made up, and I don't know, maybe, you know, like we'll see how that progresses. Maybe he was doing it though. But yeah, it is interesting to see at the same time that Canada has like arrested one of its citizens for trying to assassinate the Haitian prime minister or president. At the same time, they're also sanctioning Haitian politicians. It's a very strange time.
But there's been a bunch of different like kind of theories about the assassination of the former prime minister. His name Jovenel Moise. I don't know.
I've been saying Moise, but I could be wrong.
I have no idea how to pronounce it. Sorry.
Yeah, but even like implicating the guy who is in charge now, Ariel Henry. You know, it's like there's been a bunch of stuff. I don't think they actually have like a solid idea of exactly like the motives for his assassination or whatever. But so it's kind of like it's very intense for Canada to really like throw their hand in and be like, this is what happened, and we're going to punish people for it.
And it's just very relevant to say that like the UN exists as this paternalistic institution. We will be talking a lot today about the international institutions of global imperialism, right? The EU, NATO, the UN, and like, I mean, last week the common theme of the news was just the UN being fucking clowns, and not the fun kind or the sexy kind, all around the world. And like sorry, I got distracted by Kira saying in chat that her vape pen is clogged.
It's really exciting. Thank you for your support.
Solidarity, comrade. The UN exists as this paternalistic organization, and I think Haiti is the perfect case study of that, because like Haiti was a place that had a slave rebellion, and the Imperial Core has been punishing them ever since for having the audacity to do that, right? And Canada is one of the countries that's been involved in multinational intervention efforts through the UN to give them cholera and force them into loans that they can't pay back and shit like that. So it's like, and
there's like a huge history of political corruption inside Haiti with, you know, like links to outside sort of thing. It's pretty wild when you look back over it. And it's like everything from like, the guy that got assassinated recently, like his party have been accused of like some pretty credible kind of like corruption charges and stuff. But this is like going back to like, can't remember the name of the family, but the I think the Duvalier family, who like Mother Teresa was super tight with and was like sending all the money that she was receiving. Well, actually, it was back and forth. They were sending money back and forth, and a lot of working class people in Haiti had their money stolen and sent to Mother Teresa to fund her.
Sucks.
I mean, just
sucks. She sucks, right?
She was making a lot of money running these really corrupt little orphanage kind of situation. Well, it was like a hospital for dying people. This weird cult to suffering, and yeah, kind of like she wasn't using the money for helping these people, you know, who were suffering and dying and everything like that. She was funneling it into other stuff, including, yeah, like these weird kind of relationships with people that were basically despots, you know. It's yeah, it's pretty intense. But yeah, and so that's Haiti. Yeah.
But Tim, that is Haiti. What about Myanmar?
Myanmar. All right. So we spoke about it a couple weeks back, actually, the military
we did last week
junta.
as well.
Oh yeah. In Myanmar. So it's the military took over there. It was like early last year, I think, off the top of my head. So democratically elected government was overtaken by the military with kind of like shady reasoning that like not everyone is like super like solid about. Like it kind of seems like that kind of you know, that just really conservative reactionary kind of thing where they're just like, fuck it, we're gonna do something and we're gonna figure out exactly what happens after that at some point in the future. Yeah. And so, you know, like they claimed a state of emergency that they've been slowly kind of like extending since then, because it's that kind of thing, right? You know, like if there's like a coup or a junta, or even just, you know, like sometimes the government will do it, they'll establish a state of emergency to grant themselves special rights, you know, like I guess, you know, like you know, the use of military police and all that kind of stuff. So they've had a state of emergency since the junta. And so the actual elected government that were kind of ousted have been setting up little kind of, I guess, like you know, like ambassador kind of situations. What is it called? They're
calling it a shadow government. Sorry, embassies, is that what you mean?
Yeah, embassies. Yeah, so they've been setting up embassies in a lot of different countries around the world. And yes, so they're actually setting up like a proper, what they call a shadow government.
Which sounds more based than it is.
I know, yeah. But it's like basically like, so there's the government that's in Myanmar, and they're setting up their own kind of like parallel, you know, or the shadow government or whatever, in the anticipation of the junta being, you know, kind of defeated, ousted or whatever, so that they can just kind of like assume control, which is kind of like the dual power thing that we've talked about before, like setting up, you know, like a parallel system so that you can kind of like assume control. But in this case, it is actually the democratically elected party, the people that were ousted. And so they're kind of preparing to, you know, like I think aspirationally to kind of take back over. So so they're setting that up in Washington, but they do have their little embassies all over the place. And I think it's hopeful for them. It does kind of like show, you know, even if it's like something that if they don't have a concrete plan to assume control or anything like that, I think it's the kind of thing that you know, like once they've established that, they can actually start, I guess, making their case to the world, for better or worse, you know.
I mean, I don't know how this is going to go down exactly in terms of them like resuming power, because we did talk about this a little bit last week on the news section. We had a little discussion about Myanmar's history and its current situation. If people want to go back and watch that, I think we covered it fairly well. If people want a lot more detail about the Karen region and its fighters, the podcast It Could Happen Here did two really, really good mini-series. One was called Printing the Revolution, was about their use of 3D printed weaponry, and the other one was called I think How to Build a Revolution, and is about the movements and the people there, and Robert Evans and James, I don't remember his name, the English guy on It Could Happen Here. He sounds like when Robert Evans does a bad English accent. James the guy. They went to Myanmar and well, not to Myanmar actually. I think to a country just across the border where some people were like hiding out, having escaped, and like interviewed people, and it was very interesting.
Thank you, B.
Yeah, and you know,
in the chat.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, B-Rat. And one thing that we commented on last week was just how it's interesting. They sort of reported on like the revolutionary movement is made up of people primarily who just were like saw the military junta come in and just Googled like how to make a gun, how to make a bomb. right? Like not necessarily like ideologically coherent factions, just like people who are like fuck that and like Googled how to make a gun or whatever. And I think that's so again, I don't know how it's going to play out in terms of the shadow government resuming power if the junta is defeated, because the people who will defeat them will just be like ordinary people of Myanmar, and they may want those people back, or they may not, and that's that's kind of the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's so that's the other thing I didn't really mention just then, is that there is this kind of like the shadow government building, I guess, political power and goodwill overseas, but there is a legitimate grassroots on the ground like militias forming that are fighting back against the government. So so I think the links between them are kind of like like a little bit sketchy, but it's we'll definitely be keeping an eye on this, how it as it develops, because like they have done stuff like there was a whole bunch of people that got arrested for protesting when the coup kind of like kicked off and stuff, and they were the people that have gone to form their shadow government and stuff, a lot of them, the ministers, were instrumental in organizing for the release of those prisoners and things like that. So but like so said, the people that are fighting them are probably developing their own organizational structures that they might not feel too too hyped about the people that haven't been fighting.
We'll see. Maybe they'll love it. Maybe they'll be like, we love you guys.
Yeah, they might be like, oh geez, it's awesome, someone else can do the bureaucrat stuff. They're like, I just wanted to liberate my homeland.
Yeah. So there are two other pieces of news that we didn't fully fill out in the news section. I know we're already running out of time, so I will just go over them really quickly. I'll drop them both in the on-air text chat. So one is that we reported last week that Iranian protesters had said on the 15th they were going to stage an even bigger protest. There's been some misinformation around about the Iranian government sentencing thousands of people to death or whatever. That wasn't true. It went around a little bit. But the response has been awful. Anyway, that big protest did happen, and they have been protesting for days and days. And they actually set fire to Ayatollah Khomenei's house, Khomeini, and who was involved in the kind of founding of the current iteration of Iran, the Islamic Republic, right? Mm-hmm. And so the house where he was born is now a museum to his life and whatever, and they set fire to it, and the Iranian news sources are just denying that this happened. They literally won't admit that it actually happened. There's a lot of footage that people have checked out and been like, no, that's legit, they definitely set fire to the house.
Look around and find out,
maybe recognize his face.
This
guy.
It's that classic thing, the fascist thing of being don't trust your eyes and ears, right?
Literally, there's a burning house in front of you, but no, there isn't. The worship of Khomeini. How am I saying it right?
It's close enough.
In Iran by the regime is very strange. I remember it's kind of similar to when we passed through Turkey. We were in Antalya airport, and there were just pictures of Ataturk everywhere, but not big banners and kind of the propaganda you'd expect, but if you went up to an information desk, you could see that inside the office on the wall, almost watching the people doing the info desk work, there was a little portrait of Ataturk. So weird.
Weird.
And then the last piece of news, just that I definitely remembered, because I love to remember. It's the Transgender Day of Remembrance.
It is.
I do actually, I was caught off guard by it in chat just earlier, but I do know, because my friend actually, and a lot of people do this, hold vigils, and my friend holds a vigil every year. Mm-hmm. And basically today is the day that we remember all the trans people who've been lost since last Transgender Day of Remembrance.
I might as well read one of the Risa messages I got during today's stream from Non-Binary Superpowers. Thank you for the 18-month resub. They say, today is Trans Day of Remembrance. Our community lost a lot of people this year, as we do every year. Today we remember you and mourn the loss of our queer family members. We love you, miss you, we will remember you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
I think it's worth saying that, like, in the UK, trans, like, specifically anti-trans hate crimes, like LGBT hate crimes across the border on the rise, specifically anti-trans hate crimes have doubled, and they're at like an all-time high.
And speaking
at
of
the same time,
Elon
like,
Musk, by the way, I think it was like the other day, he removed specifically the protections, the little weak protections that were existed on Twitter for trans people, where now it's totally fine to misgender. Apparently, he made it he specifically found the ones that barely even protect trans people, because we all know how Twitter functions, but remove those. So
yeah,
and
here in the UK, the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has said that he intends to like gut trans protections, like basically just like take everything to do with trans people out of the Equalities Act, which is you know, in a very similar way to the Twitter policy you're talking about, like is basically like all the protection is very feeble that we have under UK law, and like our opposition party, the Labour Party, is a fucking right-wing farce with top cop Keir Starmer in charge, and like MP Rosie Duffield attending actual like conferences by hate movements like the LGBA, and the Labour Party doesn't care. So it's politically it's very bad, but the community is taking care of itself, and you know I can speak to that for
Tim,
sure.
were you going to say something?
Like what I was gonna say, and Chloe just mentioned in the chat as well, like Elon is like super tight with, well, he's always interacting with that Libs of TikTok account, which is like a gigantic Twitter account that has like,
which by the way basically celebrated the murder of 5 queer people at a queer bar last night.
Which is
participating
like,
in stochastic terror to try to like build up anger and hysteria in the public so that someone will do something horrible like they did. That account, and Elon Musk is
they've like fully just openly doxed people. They've like encouraged people to go to, you know, like they've got a particular vendetta against any kind of like, you know, the drag queen story kind of stuff, and it's wild. Like they're like that account in particular is like there's been a bunch of articles on it about how they're just like this random kind of like Twitter meme account, but they are upstream from so many people that are like, you know, like literally like Fox News, Tucker Carlson and stuff. They trace a lot of the stories they get that are just like, you know, just fear mongering or whatever, all the way back to this Libs of TikTok account. And it's like, and then Elon Musk is like totally just buddy, just haha, funny. It's all good memes or whatever like that. It's like, I don't know. It's fucking disgusting.
Yeah. And that's the news, I think. So,
and Trump is unbanned off of Twitter. That's a big deal.
Of course, yeah. He's also announced his intention to run again with a bunch of like absolutely insane rhetoric, death sentences for drug dealers, and like destroying Biden's radical left agenda and blah blah blah. It's very tedious. But it's electoral politics, so it's always going to be tedious.
Sorry, we don't want to be doomers, but sometimes you just have to, you know, we have to talk about some stuff like that. So.
Yep.
So now for the main content of today's episode. We've been familiar with the awful conditions of migrant processing in the US, in particular migrants from Mexico and South America and their experiences with overcrowded camps, mistreatment, children being separated from their families, all horrific stuff. Pardon me. Under Trump, this situation got a lot of reporting, and even though all the mechanisms of state cruelty to migrants have continued to worsen under Biden, the media has largely forgotten about them, which is, you know, is a story in and of itself and worth like getting mad about.
Politics again.
Yeah, absolutely, right. Like things must be good because the Democrats are in. However, on Red Planet, we like to talk about the global power structure. We often talk about the Imperial Core and the Imperial Periphery, and planet heads, planetoids, redheads will remember our like discussions of this and our more abstract episodes where we're kind of exploring this as a concept. And we like to talk about the consequences of this worldwide horror, the imperialist power structure. Now, European governments are so far from innocent in this regard. Today, we want to take a look at how policy in Europe, and in particular Britain, seeks to strengthen its violent borders in order to defend imperialism, and both the causes and the implications of it. This is an exploration of the likely near future of European policy in an episode we're calling Fortress Europe. So, my fellow hosts, Fortress Europe, how familiar are you with this term?
I'm familiar with the concept, like, you know, like initially as like the old World War II thing, and then kind of like, you know, like I think when I first started hearing about it was from kind of like liberals that were kind of using it as like a pejorative term. like they're like, oh, they're trying to reestablish Fortress Europe, and then it seems like, I don't know if the right wing saw that and were like, oh, that rules actually, or if they were already using it, but it kind of seemed like that from my end, that they were like, actually, Fortress Europe is exactly what we want. And yeah, that's my understanding.
Mule, your kind of familiarity?
Yeah, I've read an article in Organize 97, I think, about a journalist from the UK who was detained in Turkey for basically doing journalism about the migrant crisis in the Schengen zone. The Schengen zone is sort of like the main area that in Fortress Europe, if we're thinking of Fortress Europe, so imagine a border along, I guess, Ukraine, Poland, and also Turkey, and then Greece going down through the Med, and that is known as the Schengen zone. A lot of migrants from the Middle East, Central Asia, and from Africa as well, come up through the Schengen zone and try and get access to Europe through there. Other than that, the other main place is Italy. A lot of people cross over on a boat to Italy because it's a big sort of like peninsula that sticks out in the Mediterranean where you can just get onto Europe from Africa. Gibraltar is not really like, I don't really think it I guess there is a border at like Morocco kind of thing. And yeah, so that is Fortress Europe. That is like the thing.
Right.
The article I read.
That's what we can imagine as like the castle walls almost.
Yeah. Like that. The article that I read highlighted the horrific conditions in basically this journalist got put in a detention center for migrants. It was exactly like the one that we covered either last week or the week before, Manston detention center. It was exactly like that, if not worse. They were getting vaccinated for things that they weren't told they were getting vaccinated at. So basically just doctors injecting migrants with things.
Random stuff.
So, is it a vaccine? What is it? Love that. And all the kind of things like, not giving them their basic human rights and stuff like that. So that is essentially Fortress Europe.
Yeah.
We don't want migrants in it. That's what they're saying, basically. Like the EU as a whole is just like, no migrants, get them out, fuck all that. As a sort of buffer to stop people thinking about climate change, essentially.
Kind of. I mean, that's going to be a big part of what
Kira,
do you have a familiarity with the term before this episode?
Never heard in my life.
Never ever. Okay, that's cool.
I'm
glad that I can. That's good. I want to be able to target at least someone with a bit of
I'm an empty head for you.
Entry level. Yeah. Cool. All right. Excellent. So Fortress Europe was first used as a term during World War II, as Tim mentioned. If we look at the everyone's most faithful and worthwhile research resource, Wikipedia, we can see that basically it was used like by the Nazis. Like, it was used in both sides of World War II. The Nazis used it as this propaganda concept of like, we're making this strong fortress, we're protecting Europe, right? And then the Allied powers used it as this as like, we're we are getting into the fortress. And so like there was an especial like celebration of people who ran missions within Fortress Europe. Like people would get like special like medals and commendations and stuff because they like got into occupied Nazi territories. So I think that what we're going to be talking about today is very divorced from that, and at the same time it's very worth remembering that history, that it comes from like how the Nazis conceived what their own project was. Because today there are kind of two ways that it's used. Again, like Tim touched on this, right? There's the pejoratively by left-wing critics of the EU and of like European governments' policies, and it's also used by far-right groups who are going like, holy shit, that's based, like basically I don't think that it's, I would say it's the other way around to what Tim said. I don't think that it's like liberals would use it and then the far-right took it and were like, this is great. I think it's from the research that I've done with groups like Identity Europa and Generation Identity and Pegida, it really seems like they sort of started using the term first, like literally just taking it from Nazi propaganda because
they love shit like
they're
that,
Nazis, right? Like they're literally
yeah.
and then people started responding to it, and it kind of entered the mainstream and the public consciousness that way. So we're going to be talking about it from the left perspective, of course, today. But it's really worth noting that like groups like these neo-Nazi groups, right? The Golden Dawn used it. The fascist groups in Italy now use it. The like I said, Pegida and Generation Identity and Identity Europa. It's something that Tommy Robinson has mentioned. It's this widely spread fascist concept. But because Europe is having what some people are describing as a populist moment the last few years. The far right has massively seized like the levers of power in electoral politics, and so we can look at what the state is doing, and say, this is kind of Fortress Europe. Like you've completely capitulated to the far right, and now you're just doing this shit, right? But I really want to talk about how it comes from imperialism. I don't want to talk about this just from the point of view of like the far right, because I think it would really miss something, and I think it would it would ground this discussion way too much in our political moment, like right this second, in a very liberal way, in a very like, oh shit, the alt-right are doing this thing or whatever. It's not that, right?
Yeah, like Orange Man did it or something.
Exactly. Like Orange Man did categorically not do it, right? Like it's absolutely like a larger scale and more far-reaching project than that. As Mule said, right? It's about immigrants, and that's the fundamental kind of basis of this. Reason being that we live in a divided, a walled world, if you will. There's the Imperial Core and the Imperial Periphery, and inside the Imperial Core is the vast majority of income and wealth and the vast minority of population. And so a lot of people do the obvious quick maths on that if they live in the Imperial Periphery, and they're like, well, I want to live there. And so that's that's the foundation of the refugee crisis. Now we do need to talk about climate change as well, right? Like that's obviously exacerbated it. There were, is it 20? I think it's like 20 million refugees caused by the Syrian civil war, and a lot of people will say that like the Syrian civil war was like exacerbated, if not caused, by climate change, because there are a lot of like droughts in Syria. By 2050, the UN has projected that there'll be like a billion, like up to a billion climate refugees, right? So it's very relevant to understand that like climate change is a huge driver of this. I'm gonna breathe and pause and let other people have thoughts.
No, totally, absolutely, and I think it's something that's going to get worse and worse. I mean, we're even seeing like especially out here in the Pacific, islands are disappearing, and those islands are full of people. I saw something really harrowing the other day. I think it's Tuvalu. The government have conducted they've begun a process of recreating the entire island in virtual reality because they want it to be recorded for the future generations, because they've just kind of accepted that it's just not going to be there soon.
God, that's horrible.
Really, really wild stuff, and like those people are going to be heading to Australia, New Zealand, probably where they already have family, and it's a thing that we're noticing. So there's like a weird thing with a lot of policy around this kind of stuff, is where they they will say that they're loosening policy to allow more immigrants and refugees in, but it will be things where they're enabling more like high value immigrants, so they'll like people with certain qualifications and things like that. Then they'll clamp down in other areas. Like usually one of the ones they come down on is I can't remember the name for it, but it's policy regarding people immigrating to a country where they already have existing family members and stuff. And so sometimes you see things like like a parent might get approved to move to a country because they have like a skill that's needed, but the rest of the family won't, and it's like, it's really.
I hate this language of like high value immigrants.
Exactly. Right.
Just have like a different value, like depending on what capitalist skills they have.
That one of the best things that I love when people talk about value is they talk about like, okay, we have to abolish value, and I think that's great, because one of the only books I've ever read is called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Oh, I bought that for my dad.
That book is actually about a person who loses their mind trying to define what value is. So so again, like the idea of value is such a subjective, unique thing that to define a person as having value based on whether they should be allowed to not drown in the sea is fucking sickening.
So I'm going to speak at Kira for a second, assuming Kira as my empty brain to talk at. Okay, engage bimbo mode. Let's go. So there are the EU is often talked about, right? Like as if it's kind of got like only upsides and no downsides. It's like we usually only hear criticisms of the EU from like far right nationalists within Europe, right? Like the only criticisms you'll hear is like, well, they're letting all these migrants in, or they are like over regulating things, and we need to break free from from Brussels controlling our food or whatever. And so like that leaves a situation where you have like the far right perspective and then the liberal perspective. So then the far right perspective is like absolutely gibberish criticisms of the EU, and then the liberal perspective is like, no, the EU is like single market, freedom of travel. There are standard regulations across like food and medicine and work and health and safety. That's all like good stuff that helps people. And so it's often very hard to break through any like kind of actual meaningful criticisms of the EU. But I think a really good place to start would be Kurdistan. The EU as a bloc has a relationship to Turkey and Iran and Iraq, and they don't support Kurdistan or recognize Kurdistan because of that. And with the like tightening of like policing and like the more authoritarian styles of policing that are coming in, as essentially as like the state loses its like resources and power to private interests, and it needs to control the population more, so it's going to get more authoritarian, right? We see like representations of those kinds of relationships in the policing that's happening now. Like just like a couple of weeks ago, a guy didn't even hold up a sign, didn't even like make a particular political statement. He just held up the Kurdish flag at a protest in Britain, and he's been charged with terrorism, right? Oh, wow. And that's because of the EU's relationship to countries in London.
This is in London.
In London, right. And that's because of like and again, like Britain isn't in the EU now, right? But that's because of the like block of European countries and their relationship to the countries who are actively suppressing Kurdistan right now. So it's like, it's very important to understand that like the EU exists first and foremost as this like block of countries working together, right? Which could in theory be like a based thing if there are supporters of like Pan-Africanism or whatever, right?
Like, just internationalism in general.
Internationalism in general, like the cooperation of countries doesn't have to be a bad thing, but when it's the cooperation of like all the countries who did colonialism currently the beneficiaries
versus all the ones that they did that colonialism in.
Right, exactly, right. So like again, to talk about, Mule mentioned the Schengen zone, right? And like I went to Armenia. So like our way there, we decided to have a bit of fun, to like not just fly there because it was going to be like, because that would be a drag and be like quite like exhausting and also boring. So we decided to like get trains. So we decided to go like London to Brussels, Brussels to Cologne, and then Cologne to Vienna, and then get the night train from Vienna, right? And like there were so many borders we crossed, and so much like so quickly that we went across there, and the checks were just like that, right? And we just went through all of them. And that's because we were going through the Schengen zone, right, where there's this freedom of travel. And it's like, even though the UK has left the EU, like with our British passports and like as American passport, like we're still all from countries in the Imperial Core. So when we go through into the Schengen zone, right, our checks again are just like that. Like it's no issue. We're in the club, exactly, right? So first and foremost, you have to understand the EU as the block in the club, right? It's like America is 50 countries pretending to be one country, right? The EU is like 30 countries trying to do the same thing, more or less. And that's a really fundamental thing, right? Like that we actually have like the Imperial Core, but there are blocks within the Imperial Core, and there's friction between them sometimes, but just barely, like not in the same way that there are like wars in the Imperial periphery
yeah.
and like really severe shit going on all the time, because they fundamentally still understand that as one big block, the Imperial Core have this power that they can cling on to.
Yeah.
We'll wait for chat to say if there's an echo, and then we will go.
Everyone sounds loud compared to Kira, though.
No echo, yes echo. That's helpful. No echo, no echo, no echo. Sorry to whoever said there is echo, it's your fault. So we should talk first about...
One person in the chat line, there's an echo! There's an echo! It's like they've just got 2 streams open or something.
Leave them alone. They might have 2 streams open, though. Wardrella,
which
check
is pretty
your tabs.
Yeah.
Yeah, just watch us twice.
Eye and ear.
Consider opening Red Planet in VR. Anyway, we should talk first about migrant policy.
It's exactly
there are like other. So we should talk first about migrant policy, but there will be more implications of Fortress Europe, right? So one thing to talk about is, for example, like some places like dead right inside Europe that like don't actually have like land or sea borders that they're sharing with places that there are migrants to Europe from, like Denmark, right? Still have this like massively ideologically driven like Islamophobia and like fear of like African immigrants, and like Denmark has a bunch of like really horrific policies that I think people generally aren't familiar with. That like Denmark has like a few years ago there was an article that was like about like if people were deemed to be wearing like clothes too expensive for them, then they probably stole them, so like the police would like confiscate their clothes and shit
I saw
like
lots
that.
of talk about that, like people coming in like, oh, like these refugees have iPhones and things like that, and it's like especially from like Syria, where it's like people think that because the country is a war zone that, you know, like it must be just some like desert wasteland, where it's like when you look at like, you know, before, like, was the city Homs in Syria? Maybe Homs. Yeah. If you look at that before it was like just bombed to shit, it looks like, you know, a city in the Imperial Core. Like it looked like it could have been in, you know, New Zealand or Australia or whatever. And then afterwards it's destroyed, you know, and it's like all these people in there, they had nice clothes and iPhones and things like that. And it's just, like, it's wild to think that, like, oh, you know, like, your house got blown up, so you have to wear rags or whatever.
Right, exactly. You should be in poverty, like, because you have to escape war.
Or that you should have to sell those things to, you know, like, survive or whatever, when it's like, no, this phone could be your lifeline to your family who have been scattered, and
Right, yeah. Now, like, Syria is really relevant to keep on coming back to, because, again, it was, like, the Syrian civil war was exacerbated, or some say caused by climate change, and, like, it is the, like, influx of Syrian refugees that really, like, kicked off a ton of the like far right groups in Europe. Like responding to that is how Europe's like big moment of like Brexit and like and like Italy's fascism now and like all of this shit like really like came as a response to that, and it's really worth remembering that again, because like when we say that there are going to be up to 1 billion more climate refugees by 2050 according to the UN, like I mean shit could get really really bad.
I want to
like far right stuff.
I want to just sort of make a point of the fact that when I speak to tenants who have disputes with the tenants union, it's overwhelmingly women of color from migrant backgrounds.
Right.
And one dispute that I worked with this woman from Tunisia, who's a wonderful person, basically said that she thought that this one landlady was speaking to her like she lived in a desert, like she'd never like seen a door before, and like was trying to over explain like how locks work and stuff like that. It's fucked. It's extremely fucked, and it's and another thing to mention as well is that recently there has been an inquest that's found that a little kid, like this 2-year-old kid died from mold respiration. Awar Bashak, like a child from a migrant family, you know what I mean, like a child from a black migrant family. And the reason that this wasn't taken seriously is because the workers accused them of taking part in quote unquote ritual bathing, which is an extremely fucked kind of anti-African racist idea. Do you know what I mean? Like,
God.
And it's like wild, this idea that they're like, because the family said that they were like, we have no idea, like we don't know what any of that's about, like we've never done anything like that, right? Like
so I just kind of wanted to relate that to how we're gonna start to see more racism like that, like just blatantly killing people, like
it's
not
so
just
wild how fucking like ridiculous. I mean, like it's like like how uneducated have you got to be to tell a person from Tunisia, like literally from Carthage, that they might not understand what a door or a lock is?
One of the most and she was so stressed, like she literally couldn't deal with this landlady. She was like, I know that you want me to empower myself to like deal with this landlady, but I need you to speak to her because I'm not even remotely going anywhere near her. You know what I mean? Which is fair enough. But there you go. So that is something that we're going to see. The housing crisis that we have in the UK at the moment. Like I said, it's overwhelmingly people of color, migrant families that are on the suffering end of this, and that is all down to this Fortress Europe ideology that's sort of being promoted, neoliberal, general politics of our countries. Anyway, that's
I think so there's two things I want to touch on. So the first one is that like the EU as a bloc has responded to the migrant crisis, and the term migrant crisis is used a lot in media, and I want to be clear in how we're using it. Like, if there are this many people who are refugees from somewhere, like that is a crisis of refugees. I'm not viewing it as like, oh no, there are so many refugees coming in. I'm viewing it as like it is just a crisis, like it is an emergency that people need to be rehoused. It's not the same as, for example, current Home Secretary Suella Braverman described migrants as an invasion recently, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. But like this, the EU responded to the refugee crisis by like trying to take different responsibilities for like housing. Like quotas of refugees and migrants. Germany, for example, took one of the largest shares of migrants, and so like this is basically an attempt to control and distribute the share of people coming through, so that like no one country is like too immediately impacted by it, and that they can help people as much as possible is kind of the thinking behind the policy. But this does also result in like a situation where there are kind of border countries to Europe, and then there are like destination countries within Europe, right? And so like this is also in the far right mind is like the reason to be so worried about it, because like yes, people could be crossing in the Mediterranean across to Greece, Spain, France, Italy, but they could be winding up in Germany, in UK, in Sweden, or whatever, right? This is the kind of argument that like you'll see from those kind of people. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how, I mentioned before there are like internal frictions in the Imperial Core, but they're obviously nowhere near the kind of like the kind of shit that goes on outside the Imperial Core or between the Imperial Core and periphery. But like it's so I got a clip here from this is Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni of Italy. She's a fascist. That just needs to be said over and over again. She was literally in the just like fascist youth in Italy. She's a big like Mussolini fan. She just sucks. It shouldn't be overstated. I'm just going to drop the link on our text chat. And so one thing that we see here is like far-right politicians and far-right movements and like, fascist groups are able to engage with some of the like genuinely kind of legitimate criticisms of the way that the EU functions. And liberals will completely ignore this because, as I said before, like there's nothing wrong with the EU. It's all good, right? But like they're able to engage with legitimate criticisms, and because liberals are blind to those criticisms, mainstream media has no way of responding, which is a perfect like opportunity for like nourishing like conspiracy theories and like fascist kind of thought, because like you wind up with this perfect distinction between authorized knowledge and stigmatized knowledge, right? With people watch conspiracy on the left, you'll longer breakdown of that. Anyway, like there's if the liberal mainstream has like this authorized knowledge and refuses to acknowledge any problems with what the EU does, and then fascists can point to real true things that are going on within the EU or between the EU and other places, then like their base can be like really stoked up and riled up by this, because they're like, shit, that's real stuff, right? So if we look at this,
they'll be like, the liberals have no answer for this, you know? Like,
right, exactly. So this is Giorgia Meloni, again, an awful fascist. I'm talking about this in the context of fascists using some true correct facts to make more fascism. She sucks. I can't be clear enough about this. She's talking about Emmanuel Macron, who also sucks in a slightly different way.
Yeah, totally.
Let's watch the clip.
I don't know if you can hear the audio. Let me see.
I mean, it doesn't matter that much. She's speaking Italian. Fake language anyway. So,
il campo energetico con Gheddafi,
Jesus Christ.
esponendoci al caos,
So she's talking about like,
nel quale ci troviamo.
how much illegal immigration there is coming through Italy, because again, like then this is a border country. So then there's this like the fascist perspective on this is like, they over in France are like less affected, but they're making policies that let all the immigrants come into our countries at the border, right? And then she starts talking about how like France is responsible for so much devastation in the world, because they absolutely are, because colonialism never fucking ended, and France still like controls like 14 African nations. And so she talks a little bit about, for example, like uranium mining in Africa, and like France's role in like interventions in the like caused wars and shit, right? And like how that's creating migrants that then are then coming through into Europe, and like Macron kind of talks down to other like people in the EU. From her perspective, I don't think, whatever. She's very aggrieved. She's a fascist. She's like, he talks down to us when actually they could just not be like causing there to be tons more migrants. Now, obviously, she's saying this to the end that she wants there to be no migrants, but like let's just examine how true some of that is for a second. For example, the uranium mining, right? French energy group Areva does mining for uranium in Canada and Niger, among other places. Like I think they do 4 countries, right? But like in Canada, this is obviously like consistently negotiated with the Canadian government. I think it was Quebec. Like at one point, I think in 2015, said that they weren't going to give any new uranium mining licenses until they had a further like discussion and stuff like this, right? So like there's a democratic process that goes on, and like certainly back in the 90s, like a lot of the uranium mining was literally nationalized in Canada. Like it used to be like they would literally be getting kickbacks for the mining that was being done there. Obviously now with the acceleration of neoliberalism, like that's no longer the case, but like still there is negotiation with Canada before they take Canada's uranium, right? In Niger, that's not the case. Like that's just obviously Areva can just do whatever the fuck they want in Niger, in Namibia. I think Kazakhstan is another place that France mines uranium to run their power plants. And so it's again like this stuff is real. And then if like the liberal mainstream has no answer to it, they are letting like the far right rise up in this way. But it's really worth understanding that like, to the project that's creating Fortress Europe, which is not the far right, it's the liberal, like it's the imperial power structure, right? So and with that, it's the people who are currently in charge of that. So liberal capitalists, right? It's not the far right who are making Fortress Europe, it's them. And the far right aren't actually an oppositional force. They aren't actually challenging their power structure. And in the specific case of the far right going like, we should have no migrants, right? A perfect discourse is created in what like Chomsky would talk about in Manufacturing Consent, right? Where the debate is created, there are 2 sides to it, and you're being given both sides to look at. And so because you have 2 sides in an argument, you can pick a side, and then you feel like you're complicit, like you have an opinion, like you have a side. You never consider any other options. So if the argument is like no migrants or or help migrants, or like some amount of migrants, right? This is the argument. It's about like how many migrants should we let through, and that question is the fundamental like idea of Fortress Europe, is how many migrants should we let through.
Yeah.
Right? Because obviously migrants are they are a workforce, they are cheap, they're easy for capitalists to exploit, like way easier.
Yeah.
There are people, like since Brexit, there are people living in the UK who are migrants from outside the EU who like have had their passports taken away, who are working for like less than minimum wage, who are living in mobile homes in horrible conditions and doing like all of the shittiest menial labor.
Yeah.
Because like they can be exploited in that way. Well, Mule, what were you gonna say?
I got a point to make about that. That's relevant and topical.
Please.
In Qatar, where the World Cup is being held, 6,500 migrants are thought to have died during the construction of the new stadium. Not just the new stadium, but the infrastructure necessary to actually host the World Cup, such as like fucking roads to get there and shit like that.
Right.
Extremely
takes, migrants' passports away. By the way, Qatar.
Oh, is that
Yeah.
right?
Oh my
Did they do
God.
that
Oh
as
my
well?
God.
Yeah.
They're awful.
Yeah.
They're so
Yeah.
awful.
Yeah, and not to mention FIFA famously LGBTQ hosting in Qatar. But anyway, that's another thing. We're talking about migrants and Fortress Europe, but still.
I don't know
FIFA.
I don't know anything about FIFA. FIFA's like,
Oh yeah. They're like, they're big. Like, oh yeah, we love the gays, we love them, but then we'll just host Qatar in like, we'll just host World Cup.
They're like rainbow capitalism,
rainbow washing. Yeah,
absolutely. That's come up a couple times over the years with the World Cup.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. No, it was a very good point. Thank you so much for raising that. I want to say now, like, we're looking at this like idea of like a valve about how many migrants get let in, because like capitalism, like imperialist capitalism, wants to let some migrants in, but it wants to have a tight control over how many are let in. Right. So the debate being about like on one far end, no migrants, and on another far end, like, help all the migrants who want to be let in, and then we'll wind up somewhere in the middle with like our quotas of how many migrants are allowed, right? That's exactly the situation that like the imperialist power structure wants. That's exactly perfect for them. So let's talk about Ukraine for a second. Ukraine obviously created another wave of refugees. The invasion of Ukraine by Russia immediately kicked off like another wave of refugees, and in response that kicked off a bunch of more like Fortress Europe kind of wave of like discussion, some policy exacerbations, and like obviously like a lot of far-right pundits talking about like how many like refugees to accept, and then obviously there's the discourse that people can point out, like when they're white refugees from Ukraine, they get a much easier time than otherwise.
Absolutely.
But
even
like,
the way that people kind of like rallied behind the Ukrainian refugees, like on social media and everything like that. It's like we always want to support refugees and everything like that, but it's like there was a gigantic double standard there where people were like, like people literally saying, bring them into my house. Specifically, like
I've got a couch, I've got room. It's like, that's a nice sentiment,
but they won't do that for a black
disgusting
family.
That it's
like,
only for this particular group.
Exactly.
So far.
So it's really worth understanding then, right? We don't just have the castle wall, right? And the policing of the borders from the inside, and people being like, don't come in. But there are actually like cooperative agreements between countries that are on these borders of Europe and the countries directly on the other side of the border, right? So for example, this is one of the sources I have here, that there's a crucial point of negotiation between like Finland and Russia, because Finland has a big far right worry about Muslim radical extremists, blah blah blah. But they also have like a lot of migrants coming there specifically because they have one of the like shortest wait times for processing and some of the like nicer kind of like ways of treating migrants and refugees. And so because there is like, so then there is like a coordinated effort between the Finnish and Russian governments to like manage how migrants and refugees will move across that border. That gives Russia a power and a negotiating chip, because then they have a control over that valve. And again, like the valves of migration are like, it's not, yes, it's this wall, it's this policed border, it's this like fortress militaristic mentality, but it's also really important to understand that like the wall has gates in it. The gates are managed. Like people come through constantly, and it's a very deliberate process, like allowing people through. And so like one thing that we can say about like Russia, like, partly just because it's so big, partly because of the history of the Soviet Union, for many reasons, like Russia has a lot of power for a country technically in the imperial periphery. But like, and this is again when we did our episode discussing the imperial core and periphery, we talked about how that it's not black and white.
Isn't it like a semi-periphery?
There are shades to the exactly. It can be kind of semi-permeable. There are stages of the core and periphery, but like Russia has a lot of power, and one of its powers, one of its like negotiating chips, as I say, is that it holds the valve on the Russian-Finnish border. However, there are also countries. Yeah. However, there are also countries that aren't white, who are on the other side of the border and have the same kind of like negotiated the situation of trying to control the flow of migrants. So Italy, Libya, right, have an agreement to like just discuss like how migrants are managed and how they're let through and how they're treated as well. And then obviously that incentivizes Libya to also like think about its borders and who's coming into like who wants to pass through Libya to get into Europe. And so like again, this is a way that Europe creates a buffer zone around it where all the countries touching Europe have to then also act as border guards for Europe. And then obviously there's a third kind of interesting case study in UK and Zimbabwe, right? So, Mule, do you want to tell people about the Zimbabwe plan?
No, because I don't know anything about it.
The Tories with flying people to Zimbabwe?
That's Rwanda.
Rwanda? Shit.
Yeah.
Fuck me. All right, I beefed it.
So
how humiliating!
Yeah.
I would never make that mistake.
I can tell people. Well, this looks like a chartered plane to Zimbabwe in this article, so it's not Sophie's fault, obviously.
Okay.
But like they've definitely this is a new thing. Like they've gone to Zimbabwe from Rwanda because there were massive protests against the deportations to Rwanda, but it looks like a similar thing is happening here in where
so they're like, oh, it's not that people don't like us sending people like overseas, it's just that they specifically don't want to send them to Rwanda, so we'll send them to Zimbabwe.
I think that's sort of what they're trying to angle at with regards to it. But in terms of like what's the difference really? Well, there are obviously differences between Rwanda and Zimbabwe, but it's still kind of like, well, you're deporting people to a place where perhaps their rights are not going to be as safe as they would be if they were in the UK or in the Imperial Core kind of thing. I'm not sure about the rights of people in Zimbabwe, but that is a sort of big concern that I know a lot of LGBTQ plus charities have. For people who are coming to the Imperial Core as queer migrants, and
this is like what Australia was doing with the island of Nauru, where it's like there's an area outside their own jurisdiction where it's like they can kind of like outsource their human rights abuses to another country or whatever. It's it's like it's like the shadiest kind of like Imperial Core trickery where they're like and I mean this is the same as like Guantanamo Bay and everything like that. It's like they get to kind of wash their hands of some of like the worst crimes and things because they just get to outsource them to somewhere completely different where maybe sometimes even in those jurisdictions they're not technically crimes,
Right. Yeah.
I just want to point out to everyone, just full transparency here, that I didn't realize I made Sophie look like an idiot then, but she's not, because actually what happened was I made a mistake because there's a whole extra section of show notes where there's a source that I had to read, and what happened was that I didn't know that was there, and so I didn't read the source, and so I just want to confirmed that actually it was me that made the mistake. Sophie was right.
So yeah,
How
the Zimbabwe thing is
humiliating.
definitely a thing.
Mule is very smart. Uphold Mule thought. There's nothing wrong with his brain.
I found
It's
an
very
article right now about Priti Patel's the Zimbabwe deportation deals.
Yes.
And and they are
There's
saying
one in
it's
the
like,
show notes where.
Oh, is it? Yeah. Well, yeah.
Where is it?
So
The last one?
So I'm really glad Tim brought up the
Yes.
comparison to Australia because it is a really conscious thing that a lot of countries who are trying to manage their migration will try to create like offshore processing.
Yeah.
Now that like makes it sound like there's a little like facility just off the coast where people are like held on an island like Alcatraz, and that's because that's exactly what it's like in Australia. They just literally have a fucking concentration camp island for their
like an open air
refugees.
prison. Yeah.
It sucks.
And
It's really
and when
bad.
you look into it, it's so like fucked. Like Nauru in particular, there was like a lot of the guards that worked there were openly fascist people that were connected to the alt-right in Australia that had applied for those jobs because they knew that it would allow them to be fucking terrible people. And there was everything from like there was like serious abuse stuff going on there, from like sexual assault and rape against adults and children, and there was even like people producing child sexual materials, like basically like
Jesus
making
Christ.
child pornography and stuff. And these were the the fascist guards that were hired to keep out the the refugees and stuff. There's there was Beruz Bukhani, I think he wrote a book about it. I can't remember what it's called, but about his experiences in Nauru, and it was like fucking horrific. Like
Oops.
Yeah.
Thank you for the heads up, whoever.
Mule and Tim got switched for a second there.
I don't know what. Sorry about that.
It's
Thank
chill.
you.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Like and I mean, flashback to when we talked to John and Matt from Prison Solidarity Network, right? Like the prison guard association in the UK is like trying to actively recruit from far right groups because ACAB very, very, very much means prison guards as well, of all kinds. Border guard, like border cops and prison guards and like detention facility guards. These are all fucking scumbags, and they actively bring in the far right because again, it's contiguous, it's part of the same project, and that's kind of the point that I'm trying to hammer home here, is that when you think that there's like an argument between liberals and fascists, there isn't. There's a bargain between liberals and fascists. In fact, it's a well-known academic term. It's called the liberal fascist bargain. It's quite well known. And it's it's actually how the whole deal functions, and it's only socialism, it's only like worker power, it's only like community organization that is actually in opposition to the structures of the ruling class, right? So countries like the UK, like Australia, are trying to like forge like places where migrants can be processed outside of the country, because then it's just like the hopes of them being able to get into the country and live any kind of life, just like vanishingly small, just like completely negligible, because they're not even literally in the country, they're not even being processed there, and obviously like to someone who needs the Home Office to sign their paperwork to be let into British society, it doesn't make that much, like it doesn't make a technical difference whether they're in the country or whether they're not, but like it's a conscious thing, and as we've said, like it's allowing them to be prosecuted, like to be processed under different jurisdiction. It will have different conditions, and it's far away, so like the media and the population can just like not really care about it and not really think about it.
Absolutely.
So
you know what's really creepy about the footage for the Home Office concentration camp? Is that it looks like the aerial footage of factory farms. Looks very similar.
It does. It looks exactly the same.
And like that's what my first thought was, like this looks just like a factory farm. And then you look to see like the labeling of the facilities, and it's extremely creepy. It's really extremely creepy.
It's really, really, really grim.
And this is another reason why it's important to understand veganism and what carnism is, speciesism. All of these systems are extraordinarily intersected with each other. As long as you dehumanize
there is-
someone, whether it be human or animal or non-human animal, the mechanism
Yeah, I've been doing
is
a
the
lot of
same.
I've been doing a lot of reading recently on like on like non-human politics, and
Oh,
I think
I should recommend something books to you. I've got really great. Cool. Yeah, absolutely.
It really can't be like underwritten how the conscious division between like human and what really they mean by that is like industrial society and like nature, like that illusory division that's created like is such an underpinning thing to all of our politics.
Yeah, this is so it's such an. I encourage anyone who's interested in learning about this to like definitely take advantage of that. Like B-Rat, what was that book that I recommend to you? That I don't know the names of the things I recommend to you, but what was the book that I recommended to you? There's two, and they're both fantastic. And if anyone is Aphorism, that was a great book. Sorry, this was completely off the.
If you remember later, you can tell me, you can
out.
shoot me in the chat, or we can announce it if you
Yeah.
remember. What you're showing on screen right now is the Manston Asylum Processing Center, and this is for refugees, and it's actually within the UK. So this one is really worth talking about again as like a real pinnacle of how shittily like European countries, and again I'm including the UK despite it not being in the EU anymore because it doesn't matter. Like it's still part of the same block of power, right? Yeah. This is actually a place in the UK. So this is in Kent. And its capacity, we talked about this a little bit on the show before, it has a capacity for 1,300 people. There are currently over 4,000 people staying there.
Wow.
There are families, there are children staying there. There's been discussion that there's like cholera and diphtheria spreading within the camp. There are people who are just like sleeping on cardboard.
This article is making me rage.
There's like,
oh my God, I'm hearing what you're saying and I'm reading what they're saying in response. Like, our heartfelt condolences. We take the safety of those in our care extremely seriously and profoundly saddened by this event. This to me is what liberals do. They do the same thing, but then they just not exactly the same thing, but effectively, they're not like welcoming like BIPOC refugees in. They're not. Period. Whether it be liberal or like far right, but the liberals will like express all these condolences about it. Oh, it breaks my heart the fact that we killed someone.
Yeah, literally. It's so this there was a story of someone who had done the Mediterranean crossing, or maybe I think they had done the French Channel crossing. They had done a sea crossing, and they arrived in like wet clothing, and they weren't offered a change of clothing in this center for like I think 10 days, and this is an 18-year-old kid. This is like an 18-year-old kid. From his soaking wet clothing, for a week and a half, right, in the same dripping wet clothes. It's fucked. And this article is saying the first person has died there. At the moment, the media is reporting it as like they got on well. We don't know if they got on well from anything that is going around the camp. They might have just already been unwell or whatever. And it's very slippery, and it's just a bunch of shit, isn't it? Because it's just like
weird how they
weren't
just...
like.
Sorry.
Go on.
Yeah, no, just weird how they like do not communicate actually what happened like in a normal facility of any other kind. They would be like, oh no, they had COVID, or like, oh no, we know they had the flu. Like, oh, it could be anything. Like, who knows? Like, whatever.
Exactly. It's like they're trying to talk about it like, well, he was just unwell and we don't know whatever. And it's like, well, if he was unwell in any other way, right? And he arrived unwell. The fact that your facility is like 4 times over capacity. And that, like, people are sleeping on cardboard and they're not being offered a change of clothes, and there are kids who are just like crying and they've got like fucking scabies.
Like there's no angle that isn't just a total indictment of the entire thing.
Like if the guy was already sick, like and then he'd gone to a processing place, like your system was just like to look at people, be like, cool, we're gonna get you to like temporary accommodation and then into a proper house, right? Then that guy wouldn't have died, right? And it's not, and it's not like, oh, he was already unwell. Like that's such a bullshit nonsense angle. So there's also been because there's been like hundreds of people showing up like every day outside Manston to protest it and to like try and offer any kind of support they can to the people inside, although there's probably not support that they can offer unless they like stormed the gates and busted in and got everyone out and then housed them in local neighborhoods within Kent. But that would be illegal and therefore wrong, and I'm not telling them to do that.
God, that would be the worst thing.
There's not support they can do besides, like breaking into the camp and getting everybody the fuck out. People who were saying that they were outside the camp and they've seen people. There was reports that one migrant was like trying to talk to the press, and they were physically like restrained and like tackled and like dragged out of sight by the guards. Yeah, it's horrible. It's unbelievably horrible.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah, and I think this is I think that we'll probably do an episode talking to either someone from Lesbians and Gays Support the Migrants or someone from SOAS Detainee Support soon, like just focused on Manston, and that one will warrant a bit of a content warning because it is just horrible. But I wanted to give people a bit of a flavor of like just how appalling the situation of migrant and refugee and asylum seeker processing in the UK is right now, because it's a perfect example of what's going on all across Europe, because this is the migrant policy that like Fortress Europe demands, right? So Suella Braverman, our current Home Secretary, like described migrants coming into the UK as an invasion. This has been something that's been kind of focused on in tandem with the Manston camp. Which I have no qualms calling a concentration camp. It's what it is.
No, 100%. 100%. Anyone
like,
here has an issue with it, go fuck yourself. It's 100% a concentration camp.
Absolutely. Like, the British invented concentration camps to put down the Mau Mau rebellion in Kenya. It's just an overcrowded prison where they've just, like, packed everyone together and don't fucking care how they treat them. And, like, the fact that they have, like, scabies and diphtheria right now is a direct consequence of the fact it is a concentration camp. So it's really fucked. Keir Starmer, the leader of the opposition, right? And again, I'm going back to liberals and the far right, right? Because the far right in Britain is absolutely the party that's in control. Like, the Conservative Party were losing some voters to UKIP and the BNP a few years ago, and their conscious, explicit, and media published strategy to deal with this was to absorb all the policies from UKIP and BNP and therefore get the voters back by just being as far right as possible, right? The Conservative Party is a far right fascist party, and Starmer has not responded to this by being like, this is inhuman, this is a concentration camp, this should be shut down, migrants are people, and Tories fucking aren't, which is the only human response, really. Instead, he said that, like, Braverman had, like, lost control of this camp, right? And I just want to reframe that, like, this is a contiguous project. Liberals and fascists, like, this is one project working together. It's not like... It's not opposing forces in any sense. If he's saying that, like, they've lost control of the camp, then what he's advocating for is control of the camp, right? That's not a... You know, you can imagine what his solutions would be. It would be, like, fund for there to be more capacity for more accommodation at the camp, right? So then it increases from being 1,300 capacity and there are 4,000 people staying there to being a 2,000 capacity and there are 4,000 people staying there, and then they let another 1,000 or like 3,000 more people in. Like, that's just obviously the resultant consequences of, like, him talking that way and what policies they would actually try and put in.
That's kind of like I briefly touched on it earlier about the idea of you know, like, how borders have always been an industry and stuff, and so now, you know, we've had, like, the military industrial complex as its own thing, and it's like increasingly the link between them is, you know, getting fuzzier or whatever, where there's this, like, huge, like, it's like the contracts to build these places are super lucrative, the companies that maintain them, you know, it's like companies that run prisons like Serco and everything like that, these are like billion-dollar industries. And, like, there's even, like, some of the technology that they're developing, and even just, like, that they're being contracted to develop, again, lucrative contracts and stuff, is like, it's, you know, it's right up there with, like, some of the wildest stuff that we see invented for warfare, you know. And there's, like, like, I've seen things, I think it was in the Libyan refugees are being tracked down by literal, like, military drones. Like, they're following the boats out to the sea. There's, like, there's AIs used to process photographs and video and evidence from refugees to, like, do everything to try and, like, like try and find people that are like, like not legitimate refugees or like terrorists or whatever like that, all through to analyzing the video interviews to see if they're like lying or not, so they're like trusting this like like incredibly shaky AI to do it. But the companies that are coming up with this stuff, it's pseudoscience, but they're getting paid like millions and millions and millions to do it. It's wild. And a lot of these companies, they do have like active court cases and all this kind of stuff, but it's just, it doesn't matter, like it's not going to matter if in 5 years time, a company gets told that, oh yeah, all that time that you were like
it doesn't matter,
stopping these boats and you were like sending people to go live in jails or whatever like that. Oh yeah, technically that was like illegal.
It's
and you can't do
later,
it anymore.
It's always like later.
It's whatever. They've already made billions
cares.
of dollars from like killing people,
People are already now dead permanently. They can't come back.
David Graeber, everybody drink, defined direct action as living like you are already free, right? And I think that like this is what we have to look at when we're looking at this kind of shit happening, is just like people, these are human beings. Migrants are people, Tories are not. And we can't actually just like go along with a fucking system that's just like treating these people like, again, like Kira pointed out, as if they're like livestock, as if they're like in a fucking factory farm, just like waiting for slaughter. Like, this is fucked. This is unbelievably fucked. Factory farms are too, to be clear. Like, that's why the comparison is so striking. Like, it's inhuman. And like, I think that if people were living like they were already free, they would see a place where like 4,000 people, including tons of children with fucking scabies, were being held, just like crying and calling out for help. They would do something about that. Yeah. Anyway, so that's the migrant policy, and I think it truly is the biggest part of Fortress Europe, so that's why it's worth us having the biggest part of the discussion was about that. But I do want to have a bit of discussion about what the other implications are, because it's really important that we understand that it's because a lot of people will go like, well, that's all very sad, but that's happening to other people who aren't me, right? And like, a perfect example of this, and this is one of the reasons why I rail against UBI incredibly hard, is that like UBI would be a perfect example of where like you can point at the problem and people will be like, well, that's happening to people who aren't me, right? UBI would be like a policy where citizens get like a little bit of money every month. And that would not be people who are outside of the country. It would not be people who are trying to get into the country. It would not be people who are undocumented in the country. It would not be people who are living on a fucking farm down in Kent or in Exeter and who are like being made to work for less than nothing and live in mobile homes and they have their passports taken away. It wouldn't be any of these people, would it? But again, people would be like, well, that's happening to them and not me. And UBI has helped me to be able to pay my bills. So it's great, right? And then you have to have critiques of UBI that like engage with like how it's actually harmful to the person receiving it. But like, that is one of the kind of things that we can expect from Fortress Europe, is like some of the policies eventually, some of the time, very rarely, will be trying to like appeal to the population and give the population benefits based on their citizenship, based on being a European. Like
right? Starship Troopers kind of thing.
Absolutely,
like, to vote, you need to have done your, like you need to be a citizen to vote. And one of the ways citizenship is compulsory military service. But there's other things.
And we might not have like compulsory military service, but like us being cogs of the capitalist machine is still our service to Europe, right? Us being like good citizens can just include us fucking doing whatever job. Like, so I think that it's worth talking about ways that it impacts people. So one obviously is the rise of the far right, right? So if you are queer in Europe, the far right doesn't just hate migrants; they also passionately hate queer people. And the rise of the far right is, as I've been laboring on breathlessly for an hour and a half, is absolutely the point here. Like, it's absolutely part of the project. It is not like an opposition, a danger, a threat to the liberal establishment. It's absolutely just part of the same fucking project. And so liberals creating Fortress Europe and the far right are just like the zealots of the fortress. Like, they are just they are the border guards. They are the fucking the Inquisition going around and like making sure that everyone is good and correct within the fortress, right? And if you're queer, or if you care at all about queer people within Europe, then like that is a direct consequence of the EU, the European project, the imperialist power structure. Like, hate crimes against trans people being at an all-time high and having fucking doubled. Like, this is because of imperialism, actually. And this again is why, like, when people try to have class politics that's separated from these kinds of issues, it's literally just gibberish. Like, you'll see people who are being like, who will say like, oh, well, Tommy Robinson is just pissed off with the liberals, right? So actually he's making good critiques or whatever. And that goes back to what I was saying before about like authorized and stigmatized knowledge. But it's like, no, he hates migrants and queer people. He doesn't hate, he's not, like he is pissed at the liberals, but like the driving reason isn't like the critiques that he's making. When he's critiquing how liberals behave accurately, when he rarely does that, that's not where it comes from. It comes from him hating human beings.
It's just like the whole thing about like, it's like a broken clock, but like sometimes it's correct, but probably not for the reasons that he has engaged with it,
Well, actually, the Tommy Robinson thing is really pertinent, because when you mentioned what's her face, hey, I'm a little fascist, whatever, right now.
Maloney,
Georgia Maloney,
prime minister of
right. So that kind of rhetoric, right, where they're like, oh, because they're sort of like saying, oh, it's really bad for Africans, actually. Do you know what I mean? Like the best Africans should stay in Africa where they belong, and that's sort of like, well, that's what UKIP have been saying for years in the UK. Right, about sort of like, well, we think that the best Bulgarians should stay in Bulgaria, where they're needed, aren't they? The intelligent Bulgarians. We can't have a Bulgarian brain surgeon coming to the UK and being not a brain surgeon. That would be terrible. And it's that same thing, like Tommy Robinson, exactly the same. Like, it's this idea of co-opting liberal rhetoric to be a fascist, essentially, and it all sort of feeds into the same Fortress Europe idea of like, oh, actually we're just protecting the rights of working people, and we're actually fighting capitalism, and it's really bad. But the way that you do that is you be racist and queerphobic.
Right, exactly. Right.
With the
and this is like
racism.
And then you see like fascists like absolutely trounce liberals in debates because they're bringing up a bunch of shit the liberals are completely blind to, like I was saying earlier, right? They bring up a bunch of shit. Maloney there in that clip just being like, well, France is this and this and this and this and this, and they're all fucking true, right? And a liberal doesn't have any answers to that. And then people who are watching, who are like politically undecided, wind up like being racist in a way where they think they're like helping migrants, right? Like you say, like they think they're being like, well, we're taking the brain surgeons from Bulgaria, and then the blah blah blah. It's like, no, fuck you. Like you're saying this because you just want to not let any migrants in.
And the worst thing about that is that was not similar rhetoric, not exactly the same, but that's that kind of co-opting of leftist ideas where liberals have no idea and they don't know what they're on about is exactly what the Nazis did. That's literally just what they did. They were like, so, national socialists, like, So
it's very conscious. So again, if we're talking on lines that that people can say, well, that's not me, so I don't care, then first of all, if you are queer or you care about queer people at all, the rise of the far right and the violence against queer people across Europe, because it's a spreading epidemic across Europe, is a direct consequence of this shit, and that's one reason to care. But then you might be a cis het man and just be like, well, I don't think I've ever met a queer person, and that's all very sad for them, but I don't care. But actually, like one thing that's really measurable and really clear is the response of policing within the Imperial Core, within Europe, right? Within the fortress, right? Policing has to get like tougher if they're going to spin a narrative that like they need to be careful about who's being let in. Because if there's this fear that there's this like entire criminal world out there, but we're keeping Europe safe, then it's like, well, how are you keeping Europe safe unless your police are demonstrating more and more authoritarian powers? So this is something about neoliberal policy that like needs to always be said. Like, neoliberalism sells itself as like small government, free market. but actually that neoliberalism always comes with like massive authoritarianism. And one of the reasons for that is that like neoliberalism will engage in public-private partnerships, so like security forces won't just be the police, they'll be like independent contractors and whatever, and then those people are just like brutal as shit because they don't care, they're just like doing a job for a salary rather. But like another reason is that like if the state is shrinking in terms of its like grip on capital and its grip on power, then the way that it asserts power and control, the way that it demonstrates law and order is something that I don't know if like how familiar chat will be with the concept of security theater. So the idea of security theater is like, we are showing you that the policing is really severe, that the consequences can be really severe. So you better not misbehave. And people are familiar with the concept of like the panopticon, right? That the like the prison guard could be watching at any time and you don't know when they're watching, or if people haven't heard this term before, it's basically Elf on a Shelf. That's how Elf on a Shelf works. It's the most Orwellian concept of fucking panopticon surveillance theory just put into homes to like surveil children, and it fucks me up. It's like if you're teaching kids that there's something watching them all the time,
this is part of my Santa Claus.
You are psychologically damaging them.
This is part of my Santa Claus is actually problematic thread I made in like June at like 3 a.m. I was like, holy shit, it's the middle of summer and like 3 a.m. But Santa Claus is horrible, and one of the reasons is this because he sees
he's always watching you.
Well, that's why that you know when they like, has anyone ever seen that cursed Christmas meme where it's like it's the song about Santa Claus and he's like, you better watch out, you better not cry, he's gonna find out, he's gonna find out, and it just keeps going, he's gonna find out. That is terrifying. It's genuinely terrifying because that is absolutely what the idea of Santa Claus is. I love that, Kira.
And to close this off, if you are good when he watches you, what does he do? He gives you consumer products.
Absolutely.
So that's how you learn what is moral. It's like
capitalist bourgeois scum Santa Claus.
When you receive capital, that's when you're good.
So a really good example of security theater, and I'm just saying this is someone who's like traveled a bunch recently, I'm sure Tim can relate to this as well, is like in airports, right, in border control, right, you will go through so much security theater.
Chloe just mentioned that in the chat. The entirety of TSA is security theater.
Exactly right. It's security theater because it's not like they are, putting every single person through a perfect machine that can like tell everything about them and like detects all the stuff. But it's like, if they show you that they have all of these measures and all of these machines and all of these scanning and whatever, right, then before you're trying to do anything shady, before you try to pull off anything, right, you'll just think twice. Like you won't do it because you're like, well, they have all that stuff. But as I said in the Armenia travelogue last week, like I went through waves and waves of security theater with my suitcase just full of, there were bullets and knives and redacted pills and just so much shit. And when they pulled me up on it, they were like, why do you have bullets? And I was like, I went to a shooting range, it's just a spent cartridge. And then they were like, in the security log, oh, she has bullets, but it's fine. So it's fake is my point. It's very much fake, and it's there to create an illusion. It's there to create an impression of security.
Absolutely.
I know a guy that took weed to like China or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know a guy that accidentally did that too.
This wasn't even accidentally. The guy was like, I'm just going to put weed in my shoe and I reckon I can get it to China. And he did.
Yeah.
Is marijuana illegal
absolutely,
in China?
yeah.
Oh, yeah. Massively illegal. Yeah.
A friend of mine just showed up there and then like he like checked his pockets and his jacket and he was just like, oh.
God.
But the point is
it's nonsense, right?
Yeah, it's theater, and it's there to create an idea with you. It's a performance of the security culture.
Yeah,
and so it's really important for us to understand then that like making a performance of policing is really important within Fortress Europe, and that means making examples of people. That means for example, the Metropolitan Police doing things that are extreme because it being extreme will intimidate other, like the theory, and in practice this does, you know, to some degree work, like intimidates people out of like unless it's their only option and they're just trying to survive, right? And you know, I shouldn't say that without referencing Chris Kaber, who was recently like shot dead in South London for the crime of being black while walking, you know, by the police, who like, it was unthinkable to British people that police would be carrying like automatic rifles. Like it was unthinkable to British people that police would carry just like handguns like 20 years ago, and now they have like automatic rifles and they are just gunning down black men in the street. Like, and a part of that is like, it's all very like, you know, bad apples, blah, blah, blah. This went wrong. There was this problem or this mistake or whatever. But actually, like, no, it's all part of security theater. Like, I'm not talking like a conspiracy theorist here, to be clear. I'm not saying like there's a plan where they tell people you should kill one black guy a year so that we blah, blah, blah. But just like the existence of it, and then the focus on it by the media, and then like discussion around it, like, the discussion around, for example, Chris Kaber's death, and for example, Wayne Couzens kidnapping, assaulting, torturing, and murdering Sarah Everard, you know, this only resulted in more funding being given to the British police, right? Like, I was at the trans rights protests, and I remember, you know, I talked about how the media frames trans people as a threat to women. I said, I know who's a threat to women because I know who killed Sarah Everard.
I remember that.
Who were like monitoring the protest, right? Like this. But the media focus on this stuff only results in politicians giving more funding to police because again, it's all a contiguous project. Even if like the actions aren't like intentional, even if something happens that's not a thing, like a deliberate. I really don't want to inspire like conspiratorial thinking here. It's not that like horrible things are happening because they're part of a plan, but there is a plan for how to deal with them. The system absolutely has a conscious like method of recuperation that very quickly makes these things into an excuse for more funding for police to carry more extreme weaponry, right? I was in the cinema just last night, and there was like an ad which was like a black guy talking and being like, I was so nervous when my sister said she wanted to join the Metropolitan Police, and I was worried about like the dangers of it, and what about racism. But then, as soon as she started doing it, I've forgotten how I even used to worry about it anymore. And it's like, firstly, that's a fucking actor. Like, that's just like, he just wrote a script. Like, this is not even a real fucking guy. And secondly, the Met Police like shot a guy dead in South London. We're watching this in fucking Peckham, right? The Met Police shot a fucking guy dead like not 3 months ago, and we're just acting like it's okay to just have this fucking propaganda. Sorry, I'm very worked up about it now, but like, you should have seen me in the cinema because I just started yelling all of this stuff at the screen. It's my belief that like, if there is propaganda like that, like cop recruitment shit playing in the theater, it shouldn't go without someone in the theater yelling what's wrong with it at the screen. Like, someone has to be doing it, and if no one else is, it's going to be me.
And queer publication Pink News has been running adverts for the cops for fucking
Pink News.
Right, exactly. Pink News fucking sucks.
I hate it because they'll have shit that we like that's good that we should read and blah blah blah.
It's annoying,
and it's just like disgusting fucking shit.
But it's like, that's exactly what Soph was talking about earlier, about the idea of like, you know, there's like the conservatives, and then there's like the liberals, and so like Pink News will always get framed as like, this is the like the progressive perspective or whatever. So it's like, if you're on this team, you're with Pink News, and if you disagree with them, then you're wrong or whatever. You know, it's like
exactly.
Yep.
So I think that covers in terms of like people who would think that's not going to affect me, because we've got queer people, but then if you're not queer, you might go, well, that's not me, so it's not going to affect me. And then we've got policing, and you might think, well, I'm not a person of color or working class, so that's not going to affect me. And if I've eliminated you in those categories, I don't need you on my side, because there are more of us than there are of you. So enjoy the rest of your life and how it shakes out. So that's what I want to say about Fortress Europe. Open to questions and further discussion.
Well, if you have any questions, get them now. While y'all are talking, I want to do some recommendations. So this is just to go back to our veganism when we touched on it. This is a YouTube video. I know if chatters don't want to read, here's a YouTube video. It's fantastic. It's short, and it's Christopher Sebastian McJetters, and he discusses the intersections between white supremacy, specifically anti-black racism, and speciesism, and how animal liberation is directly, all this shit's tied directly together. It's not just like it meets, it's like it's the same thing.
I'm opening this in another tab. I'm going to check this out after the stream.
Wonderful.
We watched this on our animal liberation show, right?
And so I wanted to make a note. Yes, I only saw some of it though, but I did want to make a note that there is the N word in it with the hard R to discuss like the way that people, anti-black racism. So don't play this on stream. I downloaded it and I edited it to like. Censor it out, but like, just I don't want y'all to get a ban. But really good video, really short to just get a feel for what's up. Also, 2 books I want to recommend. They're both from the same author, Af Ko, who is a black vegan feminist, and she's fucking dope as hell. And
AFCO is like the name of like the gigantic meat processing company down here. So
serious?
I thought like like AFFCO.
That's
it's like it's
funny.
a huge thing. There's like people have been going off against them for years. So when you said AFCO, I was like, wait, what? AFCO is woke now?
No. So there's 2 books I want to recommend. One of them is Racism as a Zoological Witchcraft, A Guide to Getting Out by AFCO. It's fucking-tastic. I think maybe Mexi turned me onto this book. Not sure. And then the other one is this one, also by AFCO, but also with her sister Silco, and it's called Aphorism, and it's essays on pop culture, feminism, and black veganism from 2 sisters. And I highly, highly recommend, like with all politics that we discuss, especially when it comes to intersectional politics, which everything should be approached intersectionally. Try to find, say, for instance, black women or black queer people or indigenous people or try to find it's important that we hear this stuff from non-white people and queer non-white people are best, or queer or non-white women. And I don't want to get too like itemized because it destroys the entire point of what I'm trying to say, which is like intersectionality isn't like this bullet point. You have like points added up. It's this, it's much more nuanced than that. But I just want to, there's a lot of white women talking about veganism. We really don't need, I mean, they have plenty of great things to say often, sometimes, but it's important that we try not to go down that road if you're going to look into veganism. Anyways.
Can I make a couple of recommendations of Marxist and anarchist books I've been reading recently?
Yeah, sure.
That are also about like non-human comrades and like cooperation with the natural world. So again, We Are Nature Defending Itself by Isabel Fremeau and Jay Jordan. We had these 2 on the show a few weeks ago. Kira, I cannot say this enough times. You should go back and watch that episode. Like,
both of you
really love it. Like seriously. But it was good as fuck, and they're really based. And also, they have invited me and Mule to come over to the ZAD and hang out. And we'll do some filming and make it a little like
Fun.
Red Planet documentary or whatever. It'll be very good. Anyway, so We Are Nature Defending Itself by those 2 was incredible. A lot of focus on non-human comradeship and solidarity in that. There's a beautiful scene that I got a bit teary at where they were kind of describing like their time on the ZAD with like this one time where there were like all of these like bullfrogs like croaking in this just like fantastic symphony, like existing there in the nature. It was really good. Staying with the Trouble, Making Kin in the Cthulhu Scene by Donna Haraway is an amazing book in terms of like reframing our imaginative language, because a lot of people talk about climate change by talking about the Anthropocene, like humans are changing the world, so it's the Anthropocene, like things are determined by human activity. But she's making this point that like we should think, if we want to stop that and combat it, we should change our understanding and think of the Cthulhu scene instead. Like, think of the things that are beneath the earth. Think of the root systems and the fungus and the worms and the insects, right? And yeah, it's a very good book. And also Nat at the moment is reading The Mushroom at the End of the World by Anna Lowenhaupt Singh, which is just unbelievably good, and I can't recommend to everyone strongly enough.
Thank you,
But
B-Rat,
that stuff's
for putting
all
these in the chat.
about.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, B-Rat. All that stuff is about non-human solidarity and speciesism and animal liberation, and I think that we I think if I wanted to recommend something to do with what we've been talking about today, one thing I would talk about is The End of Policing by Alex Vital, because we were touching on policing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Another one that would be absolutely crucial would be The Shock Doctrine by Naomi Klein, just because when we're talking about governments responding to crisis by just becoming more authoritarian, The Shock Doctrine is the, like, foundational text on that shit.
Read it. Oh my god!
Because
and
we're
like that
talking
whole
about
like,
imperialism,
security theater thing we were talking about is absolutely linked into that. Like,
so much so, yeah.
Such an intimidating
because
read for me, though. I hear it's like really dense. Shock Doctrine, right?
I wouldn't say it's dense. The thing I would say about it is that you'll take breaks because, like, you'll just read something and it will be the most depressing thing you've ever heard. And like, my example is always like 5 pages in. She talks about like the fact there is a subway at Guantanamo Bay, and that was the first of like many times through that book where I was like, yeah, I'm gonna take a break. I'm just gonna put this one down for a minute and just like process what I just read there before I carry on. And because we've been talking about imperialism today, I think that anything by your boy Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov would be good, but in particular, you know, Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism, State and Rev, you know, the classics, the good ones, the big ones, the hits.
Yeah, particularly I think Imperialism is very relevant this time.
Yeah, I mean, I was discussing this with Nat, I think, just last night, but, like, you know, one thing about Lenin was his sense of the political moment, and, like, there was a time, it was during World War One, when, like, all of his comrades turned against him because he was saying, like, our only take on the war should be working class people are being sent to die, but by the bourgeoisie, and that's fucked up, and they should turn around and stop killing each other and kill the bourgeoisie instead. And like instead, like, all his comrades were like, no, we have to like support the Russian troops who are dying in this thing. We should back them. We should have like a communist nationalist perspective that's like backing our troops, and it's like you can see how they all got caught up in the moment of what was going on around them, right? But he was right, and we can see, like, we with hindsight can just be like, yeah, he was obviously fucking right. Like, you know, I think that's kind of relevant to this as well, when this war was going on.
When just recently with Ukraine and stuff, they were like, there was like, I think it was the Communist Party. I think maybe the over in the UK, well, one of the communist parties you guys have had put out a statement that was like, you know, like, it is our position that, you know, working class people do not go to, you know, should not be sent to fight, you know, these wars or whatever. And all these like Twitter leftists and stuff were just being like, you know, like, what the fuck is this? Like, you know, blah, blah, blah. Like, they should be going over there to, like, liberate the people of Ukraine and stuff. And it's like, man, like, this has been a consistent position of communist parties since, you know, the dawn of communist parties, is that, you know, it's like...
Ukraine has really melted their brains. They just, like...
That's what I'm saying. Like, times of war just fuck people up so badly because it's like...
But specifically white people being killed in war. That's a real
for sure. I mean, yes, definitely. But I just think, like, people, it's the horror of war and the inhumanity of it, like, puts people in a kind of crisis mode where they're like, they suddenly believe fucking anything, right?
I realize how, like, bizarre, like, how tense of a situation it is to have a military. So militaries, you arm to the teeth the working class, but and you have this is a working class that's so oppressed that you're like, they're now putting their lives on the line, and they're armed, and you're banking, the state's banking that on all of them not just turning their weapons toward the state. So you have to initiate this incredibly hyper, like, nationalistic, hyper oppressive, like, patriarchal system in order to subjugate all of those workers who could very easily just turn around and
I mean, that was like
kill the workers.
Also a turning point in the October Revolution, right, where the soldiers kind of were like, wait a minute, like, what are we doing here?
I
read recently about the one of the final deciding battles in the Russian Revolution. It was like a palace, and there were about 1,000 people inside who supported the Tsar, and outside there were 40,000 revolutionary soldiers. And they just like, and apparently like within 2 hours of the siege, they started the siege in the morning at like 7 a.m. or something. Within 2 hours, the artillerymen within the palace were just on the other side with the workers. And then later on, they didn't even really fight. They just kind of like, the people in the palace just kind of gave up. They were just like, this is ridiculous. Look how many of them there are. We can't even do this.
There's a huge history within the October Revolution of like police and soldiers just being like, nah, we're not going to do this. We're not actually going to like put down these
Star Trek episode I just watched in Deep Space Nine where I can talk about it, but I don't want to talk about it. It's really
but that tense situation you're talking about, Kiro, like the like they're arming the working class, like it's A, why they have to pump the military full of as much anti-communist propaganda as possible. It's B, like Tim just said, like why, you know, there was a moment where like the fucking there's like a moment in October by Chernomievel where he describes like a battleship pulled up into the like port of St. Petersburg, and like the soldiers on it, like the Navy men on it, were just like, hey, so we have mutinied against our officers and we've decided like we're done with taking orders from them, but like who's out there? Like, what kind of offers do you want to make to us? Because like we got the battleship, so like we kind of got the whole deal here. And it's C, like I'm saying, why like Lenin, like the Bolsheviks' dedication to the nature of soldiers as an oppressed, like as an oppressed part of the working class was so important, because like I think that like radically liberating soldiers and red pilling them on like the fact they are oppressed workers is like fucking vital.
God, I think that like that episode, I'm gonna figure it out. It's such a good episode for this.
I think if you get the title, like I think like with the thing in Ukraine, like
it's the episode where Kira and the Shakar group met with the other group that were now like they turned into like cops for the state, and now they're both like trying to kill each other over what the Kai wanted 2 reclamators.
Right.
None of these words are in the Bible.
That was the nerdiest thing in the fucking.
I'm watching DS9. I'm actually watching DS9 at the moment. It's really
I have been like watching little bits here and there, like
DS9 except the anti-Semitism. The anti-Semitism is out of sight in DS9. It's crazy. It's so bad.
Okay, if you
like
consider
Quark is literally played by a Jewish guy, and it's very deliberate, and everything about his character is like exactly the archetypes of how like Jewish characters comic relief in every piece of media.
I've heard
like
this
it's really bad.
Before, and I'm the worst person. You know, anti-Semitism is so it's so like it's not malicious, the word, but it manages to take tropes or like things that we should be against, like capitalism, or we can point and laugh at greed and stuff like that, but then it mixes in representations of Jewish people in some capacity that it becomes so messy. And like
if you racialize capitalism, you get anti-Semitism.
That's how you consider it. If you consider any racialization of capitalism to be anti-Semitism, then the Ferengi are anti-Semitic.
I'm just saying it will wind up there. Like I'm just saying it will wind up there. Like it will. As I said in the Armenia travelogue, like there was a similar dynamic at play with Armenians in the Armenian genocide.
I do think though
we're talking about DS9.
I do think though a representation of capitalism in a communist utopia is necessary, though, personally.
Oh yeah, sure.
I'd like to say that Star Trek shouldn't like showcase capitalism.
I absolutely agree that Star Trek should have that, but maybe let's do let's you know what we should do?
Finally, a topic I can actually contribute to and not feel lost in is Star Trek. Let's go.
Here's what we should do. We should watch some DS9 episodes in the Red Planet Patreon server as a watch party.
That's a great.
We'll chat about
You know what? We're totally gonna do that.
That's what we should do.
Who gets
I know.
To
I'm
be
so
in
I'm so unbelievably down.
Though? Do you get chatters join us in the Patreon
People
server?
Well, let's talk about the Patreon in 1 second. Do you want to close off the topic that we were talking about today, which was Fortress Europe?
No,
because people haven't actually asked any questions, but Shafik Mog said something I really want to give voice to. He said, I have something to say, which is not a question. If I had been born a few months later, my citizenship would have been endangered by my engaging in activism and protest. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly the kind of shit we're talking about with how much is clamped down on, control of who's allowed in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And radical types, absolutely not allowed in, right?
Yes.
But yes, Kira, you ask a very good question. Who can get in the Patreon server? Mule?
Well, you can get in the Patreon server if you're a patron, a certain level of patron. I feel like the first level of patron, no, the second level and upwards, isn't it? That's what it is. That's the.
I'm checking now, and Sprite Mode says maybe Discord access, not decided yet.
Yes.
Lamau.
Yeah. No, but the reason it wasn't because we hadn't decided if Sprite Mode should get Discord access. It's because we didn't decide if we should have a Discord or know how to get it.
Okay.
So that tier definitely is Discord.
So you're telling me for as little as £2 a month, people could be in our Discord, our Patreon Discord, which we have now created but not fully set up.
Apparently so.
Which exists now.
Right. But Tim, what I want to ask you is,
call that the
if
alpha,
people wanted to
the
give
alpha Discord, by the way, it's the alpha version.
if people didn't just want to be a little sprite and give £2 a month, what else could they do?
They could, if they were brave enough, engage Goblin mode for on my end it's saying New Zealand $19 per month plus GST. Oof. So I'm not sure.
$10 a month American.
$10 in freedom bucks. Everyone loves a goblin. We all get a little goblin mode from time to time. Complete your gobology by doing goblin mode. So you get access to the Discord. You get a set of stickers to stick in legal places, of course, and access to Patreon-only Red Planet Discord hangouts. Nice. So so that's a distinct tier because I'm assuming there's Discord access and then there's Hangout access. I don't know.
I think that is the way we'll structure it. I think that would be very easy to implement, actually. Yes. I want to pitch this. Goblin mode people should have access to the Goblin content when we film at Mule.
I agree.
Yeah. We're gonna film this at the end of the month, next week or whatever. We should give them access to the Goblin content.
Yeah, that's right.
But Kira,
tight for me in a bin bag.
Kira, if people were neither a sprite nor a goblin, what would that make them?
That will make them a beast. So they should apply and join the beast mode. So if you're a beast, you want to look for the beast mode. Okay, that's $20 a month. So you're gonna get all the shit from sprite mode, all the shit from goblin mode. And you're also going to get pins. And you can wear that pin.
Yeah.
What?
Wow.
You can have the pin and then you can wear the pin. We're
it's legal. It's allowed.
Yeah.
For now.
But also you can support us more, which is, that's a treasure in and of itself.
If you wanted to support us more and you wanted to go sicko mode, then you could give us. It says £94 per month here. I think it's $100 a month.
$100
freedom
for a real sicko. Then we can only reasonably offer you all of the things that we already described, and as well a very special thank you message at the end of every stream. So literally now, if there were any are there any sickos? Do we actually know if there are any? Right now, if there were any sickos, I would be going, thank you very much, Comlord69, for being a sicko.
You're welcome.
And supporting Red Planet on the highest tier. So
that's right. That's how that works.
Okay.
Conrad, help.
Check that out at patreon.com/red_planet. It will pay for Conrad Zimmerman to produce our show. He's doing a wonderful job. It's going so well. The show has already improved vastly. I mean, that's it, right? That's the deal. Check it out, patreon.com/red_planet. Next week we are talking to some people from the Tenacious Unicorn Ranch in Colorado about their experience fighting fascism and tending to alpacas. So check it out. It'll be a good time.
There you go.
Oh, someone's asking what happened to the Just Stop Oil episode.
Oh, don't start. God, what do you want?
It's been rescheduled. We
had a whole show and everything.
Our guy was busy. We're just doing it later.
Just stopping oil.
But we appreciate that chatters
that's
are
what
paying attention.
Yeah.
It's good that chatters are paying attention and asking. That means you get a gold star.
I'm mad.
Thanks for checking in, but it is
bothering
happening.
us.
It is still happening. Don't worry, just at a later date. Next week will be the Tenacious Unicorn Ranch. We were very excited to find out they're just fans of the show, and so they're going to come on the show. Tell us about what they do. It's going to be
That's
great.
okay, Waluigi. Don't worry about it. I forgive you.
Cool.
All
right.
Thank you very much for all that. And where do
one
we
last
find...
quick thing was next week also, hopefully by next week, we'll see if it's produced by then, but Mule and I are going to Oxford to talk to the October Club this week to give speeches and do a little Q&A, and we will record it, and hopefully by next week we'll have that up somewhere. So if you are interested in that, that's another reason to check out patreon.com/red_planet.
But where can I find you, Sophie? We're still doing this, right?
Me?
We're still doing this, right?
I'm Sophie from Mars, and you can find me on YouTube as Sophie from Mars, or on Twitter, Sophie_FRM_Mars. But people say Twitter is dying, so maybe check out Sophie from Mars at octodon.social if you're on the Fediverse, if you're a cool kid. But the most important place to check me out is patreon.com/Sophie from Mars, all one word. That's the one that pays my rent and bills.
Sounds like a Catgirl website, honestly.
Patreon.com/Sophie from Mars. It is literally a Catgirl website because you're paying to support a Catgirl. So check out patreon.com/Sophie from Mars. I'm going to be making a big project about doomerism and why it's cringe soon. So I think you all might like that, you little planetoids. But if you are a planetoid and you are in the orbit of the ultimate Sigma male Conquest of Dread, then where would you find more Conquest of Dread?
You can find me on Twitch and on YouTube as Conquest of Dread, or over on Twitter as Dread Conquest. I feel like, Twitter might die, or it might just get scooped up by someone else, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if someone like, Meta or someone just bought the whole thing and relaunched it.
Could happen.
And I wouldn't even be surprised if the whole thing was Elon just short selling
just being a goofy.
I don't think so, but I think
I think it's gone too far for that.
He might turn it.
That would be silly.
But no, I'm not too sure if it's going to disappear, but that's probably the best way to kind of keep track day to day with the comings and goings of myself. But less about my comings and goings, and where can I find out about the comings and goings of my good friend Kira Chats?
Oh, me. Well, I'm here at twitch.tv/Kira Chats, where all of you are.
But where are you coming?
Where am I coming?
Where are you going?
So where am I coming? Well, you could check out my link tree. So it's in the chat right now, !socials. It's where I've been spending most of my time and energy and creativity and creating the most content. It is not safe for Twitch, so I cannot be any more specific than that. Wink, wink, wink. But DJ Mule, my little peanut, I would like to have more of you in my life. How can I make that happen?
You can get me on YouTube. I do YouTube, and I've stream on Twitch, and I've got an Instagram. I'm on Be Real now as well.
Oh, wow.
Actually, I'm on Be Real, so you can follow me. I don't know how that works really. And TikTok, I'm on TikTok as well. Just search my name on all these. And Patreon as well. I can do Patreon and money on there for me, please. That's what I want. I'm very tired. Money me up. Money me up.
That's what he wants.
I'm tired now. This is my bedtime now. You're all
He's a little mule.
You're all awake, and I don't do this anymore. I was up at 7 this morning, getting a monkeypox vaccine. I'm fucking old.
Oh wow.
Wait, what?
That's right.
They have
you
those?
heard. Yeah, oh yeah, they got him. Yeah.
Oh wow. He's shrinking.
I'm getting mine soon.
Because you'll fit a mule in your pocket. Everyone can have their own mule in their pocket.
That's not confirmed, but certainly a pleasing idea, isn't it?
All right, well, on that note, Mildred is on, so let's raid Mildred. Thoughts line.
Let's do it.
Patreon.com/red_planet. Pay Conrad. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Love you loads. Bye.
Bye.
Can he still hear us?
rating this time.
Okay, now we're rating. Okay, all right, bye.